Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the August 31st, 2023 Smithfield Town Council work session on the Grange at 10. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you again. Welcome to everyone. The first item on the agenda will be the town staff presentation on the PMUD application process and review process. And the first speaker will be our town manager, Mr. Michael Stallings. Mr. Stallings.
Yes, sir. I'm going to start off with everybody has at their place a packet, and I'll go through on what this is. This is also, it went on the town's website as soon as it went to you guys once we finished it this afternoon. So anybody that wants to see this can go get it from the website. In here is all of the questions that were previously submitted by council members that we obtained answers for. That is in here, as well as quite a few list of questions we've received since the committee meetings at the beginning of the week from citizens that we have provided as much answers as we could to. Because they came from different departments, in my office, from community development as well as tourism, the answers are provided in different colors, and the little table of what that is at the top of each email is where they came from. So that is in your packet as well. I'll also say that we've got community development director is going to do a lot of the talking as far as process. However, we've got multiple department directors here, so if there's questions that come up of any of them, you can at any time ask them, and we will do our best to provide the answers that we have or that we can give you based on your questions. So if there's anything specific of me right now, if not, we'll turn it over to Tammy and let her go through, kind of explain the process of what we do when we receive an application. We can kind of talk about the timeline on how this was handled, what reviews it's gone through, and we can talk about that, some of the PMUD and how it was set up by our planning commission, so we can kind of dispel some of the concerns around the way the PMUD is operating. But if there's no specific questions of me at this time, we'll turn it over to Tammy and let her start.
Any questions of Mr. Stallings? And just as a heads up, you've got the questions that you presented to the town for inquiry. You've also have the questions there that your citizen constituents provided as well. What we will do after we receive the presentations from community development and economic development or whatever, development director, I will go around the table and I will start just so then there's no surprises with the vice mayor. Any questions that you may have, this is the time to ask them. And no limitation on the questions, no time on the questions, no time limit. Take your time, ask whatever you want to ask. Everything is fair game. After that, after each question, just so we have the rules straight, I will ask council if they have any follow-up to the responses that you may have gotten, so that they have a chance to weigh in on the questions that you may have as well, so that we get a thorough vetting and thorough response to the questions that are provided. And if I miss one or forget to do that, Madam Vice Mayor, you can let me know. But I want to make sure this runs orderly, but at the same time, more importantly, that the questions that you have, so that you can make an informed decision when the time comes to vote on this matter, is at hand. So with that, Mr. Stallings, please proceed.
Ms. Tammy, if you'll go.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Just to kind of summarize.
Can you put that microphone up? I know they probably can't hear it. I already see it. So we'll talk about microphones later. But anyway, yes.
So just to summarize the process with the adoption of the planned mixed-use zoning district, the PMUD, the Planning Commission did craft this ordinance to allow developers the utmost flexibility for crafting their unique project. At the same time, they also wanted to maintain control over the project, and so they provided a lot of uses in the special use permit category. This would allow them to attach any conditions to the project.
That will work.
For example, the densities in the PMUD are the same as the densities in other residential zoning districts in town, the SR, NR, and multifamily residential. Other localities opted to take a different approach. For the PMUD, they provided higher densities for their planned mixed-use districts. This does force the applicants to apply for multiple special use permits when they come before the Planning Commission and Town Council for this rezoning for the PMUD. Just to kind of give some background on the Grange application, we did schedule a pre-application meeting back in January 4th of 2022. The consultants that were tasked with completing the traffic impact analysis, they did contact the Community Development and Planning Department on April 26th, 2022. This was to begin the traffic discussions concerning the proposed project. These discussions continued with the consultants throughout multiple meetings and email exchanges between the town, county, and VDOT. The application package for this project, the full application project for this project, was received on December 8th, 2022. This application, the entire application package, was sent out to Isle of Wight County Stormwater, Isle of Wight County Planning, Isle of Wight County Schools, the Commissioner of the Revenue, Virginia Department of Transportation, Virginia Department of Health, the Department of Historic Resources, the Town of Smithfield Treasurer, the Town of Smithfield Police Department, the Town of Smithfield Fire Department, and the Town of Smithfield Public Works and Utilities. Any comments, concerns, or issues with this application, they were relayed back to the applicants. The applicants made 3 additional submittals to address these concerns, comments, and items. On March 24th, 2023, the application was deemed complete, and the applicants were notified it would be scheduled for the next regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting. Again, just to reiterate, the first iteration of this application came in December of 2022, and comments were relayed back and forth to the applicant and resubmittals, and a final application package was not completed until March of 2023. Excuse me. On April 11th, 2023, it appeared on the agenda for the Planning Commission. This was as a discussion item. On May 9th, the application package then appeared on the Planning Commission's agenda as a public hearing item. The Planning Commission also held a special meeting on May 24th to discuss this application package. And then finally, on June 13th, the Planning Commission made the following recommendations to Town Council. The first one, favorable recommend approval of the conditional official zoning map amendment, the rezoning application to Town Council. Favorably recommend approval of the request for the comprehensive plan amendment, the future land use map, to Town Council. Favorably recommend the special use permit to allow multifamily residential dwellings in the development with the condition that the buildings do not exceed a height of 46.5 feet for the 4-story and 39 feet for the 3-story buildings. Favorably recommended the special use permit request to allow a waiver of maximum density to allow no more than 27.5 dwelling units per acre, per net developer acre for the multifamily residential dwelling units, with the overall development containing 7.9 dwelling units per net developer acre. Number 5, to recommend denial of the special use permit request for the waiver of maximum building height. Number 6, to favorably recommend the special use permit request for a waiver of parking and loading requirements. 7, favorably recommended the special use permit request for a waiver of yard requirements. And 8, favorably recommend the special use permit request to allow 5 short-term rental units to Town Council. Additionally, Dr. Pope requested clarification on item 5 above. He stated that it was not his intention to recommend denial of the 42-foot height hotel and the 39-foot 3-story buildings. The intention of his motion was only to deny the height exception requested for the 52-foot 4-story buildings. Just as a reminder, in our future land use map that we mentioned an amendment to, the majority of this property is already designated on our future land use map as the commercial mixed use. It's the 10 parcels, smaller parcels that are located surrounding the larger parcel that is not the commercial mixed use at this time.
Can you say that again?
In our future land use map that we adopted, the majority, the larger parcel that encompasses these is already designated on the future land use map as commercial mixed use. There's remaining smaller parcels that are also owned by the applicant that encompass this application that were zoned the historic, I believe it was historic district and down to historic mixed use. But again, if you look at the future land use map, the large red section of the future land use map in that area makes up a majority of this project.
Do you have that in the file? Sorry, do you have that in the file, Ms. Cleary?
It is, I don't have it to pull up there, I apologize.
All right.
But I can get it.
Further questions, Councilor Roundtree, this time?
Not about that. I had
Okay.
something else.
Proceed, please, Tammy.
That was all, thank you.
That's all.
And I want to put.
Mr. Stallings.
Yes, sir, if you, what I'm about to say is not pertaining just to this project, to the PMUD as a whole. As you notice, there's a lot of special use exceptions. As our planning commission was developing this PMUD zoning district, a lot of localities, when they do this, they are completely wide open. The applicant can bring whatever they want, and then the locality decides whether that works or not. Our planning commission elected to do it almost exactly the opposite direction. They put a lot of special use exceptions that could be asked for, and that way they would ultimately have total control over which pieces of those they allowed or didn't allow. So the fact that there's 8 special use exceptions, anytime that our PMUD gets used in the future, it'll look the same way. Because instead of having a wide open zoning ordinance that allows them to just come propose pretty much anything they want with some loose guidelines, ours is exactly the opposite. There's some really tight guidelines that mirror the existing zoning districts. But if somebody wants to fully utilize the mixed use component of it, they will have special exceptions in their application package. So again, that's not pertaining just to this project, but that's any PMUD project that we have in the future will have a substantial number of special use exceptions with.
Okay. I did take the opportunity to invite, and she's with us tonight, Ms. Julia Hillegas, who's also on the Planning Commission and the Board of Historic Art and Architectural Review. So, Ms. Hillegas, based on what Mr. Stallings said, do you have any comment? Would you like to weigh in on that or add anything to it or whatever, since
He's exactly
you're
right.
here for a purpose, and we'd like to hear.
Excuse me, he's exactly right. And that was with intent. A lot of planning commission members felt very strongly that they wanted to have some structure. They didn't want folks to start with just an empty slate. They wanted to have some parameters and some guidelines to base, to give folks some direction, and then anything that varied from that, they wanted them to come to us and ask for a special consideration. So we had, sort of a stick, if you will, to give people some guidance, to say, no, that's not what we want to see. That's not how we want, the historic district to look. That's not how we want our mixed-use developments to look. So we have more control, quite frankly, to have what we'd really like to see our town look like. And that was done with intent.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Ms. Hillegas?
Mr.
Ms. Roundtree?
So, Ms. Hillegas, specifically with regard to Bihar and your role on that, isn't it true that, so when and if, zoning variances are approved, is it true that if changes are made, they never have to come back? Like if you changed, part of the plan from retail to something else, or you change it from a boutique hotel to something else, that they wouldn't have to come back and still get things approved by Bihar, or do you still have control over that?
We would definitely see the elevations on anything that would come before Bihar. And we've been known to beat a dead horse over a paint chip, so that would, that would definitely come.
So like instead of a restaurant, somebody wanted to put a vape shop, that would come to you, right? That wouldn't be allowed.
Not the use, no. We're just exclusively concerned with the way things look.
Right, I think what you're getting to is with this PMUD, there has been a statement that once a PMUD is approved, then.
No, that's
somebody-
a question Mr. Harris posed
Right.
specifically,
So
correct?
after a PMUD is approved, that somebody could go and do whatever they want. That's not the case. They would have to remain in substantial conformity to what was part of the proposal as the approval happened. Because the PMUD, you are approving what's being proposed. You're not approving a carte blanche. I mean, if somebody wanted to come in and instead of, townhouses, they wanted to go put in a skating rink, I mean, that wouldn't be okay because it's not part of the proposal. Anything that would be substantially different than what is being proposed would not be okay. Now, we don't get into what kind of store, are you selling stationery, or are you selling flowers? The overall zoning district would tell you what uses are okay. But, so if they say right now they think a flower shop will go in here and it winds up being a Hallmark store, I mean, that's not something that it's still retail space, so it would be okay.
Thank you. Guess we found the map.
Madam Vice Mayor? I'm
They
sorry.
found the map.
Oh, okay.
Julia, in reference to the,
Valerie, can you put that microphone closer? There's folks in the back.
in reference to the explanation that you gave in developing the PMUD, based on the information that I looked up, it has described usually PMUDs as being a vehicle in which a developer can be creative, and the product itself, the vehicle itself also being flexible. And I think it's important what you said as far as what our planning commission did. We just didn't want to give carte blanche to a developer. So our variances are not specific for our PMUD. They're the variances that we have for regular requests. And that's so that the planning commission can look at every submission and it stand on its own merit.
Exactly. We want to see good projects. We want to see high-quality projects. We want to see some creativity, but we want to have control.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
I had a question specifically for Ms. Clary.
Proceed.
Okay. Ms. Clary, can you cover with town council your training and educational background?
Yes, I have a law degree. I went back to school, have my master's in political science. I went back to school for my PhD in public administration. I was in the process of writing my dissertation when I started here about February of 2020, starting as the planner.
And to your knowledge, like the planning commission members, have they been to training? And my line of questioning, I mean, where this is kind of coming from is that, over time I've heard citizens say, these, the people on planning commission or Tammy aren't qualified to help advise on, the merits of this application. And I think you're no slouch, having been to law school and working on a dissertation and all that.
So the Virginia Commonwealth of University does offer planning commission training along with the Board of Zoning Appeals training. When I did complete the training at that time, it was offered to planning commissioners. I don't know that any of them took them. I'd have to research to see if they've taken the classes before, but they are offered.
I have had it, if that.
Julia, you have? And Michael, I thought when I asked you, you said some, if not all, of the planning commissioners had been to that training.
Yes, ma'am, that's my understanding. We can go back
Some,
and
if
check
not all?
of them.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, it is one of the first things that's offered to them, and of course, the town pays for them to go, same with the BZA training. So it is something that is made available to them, and most often they take that.
Thank you.
If I may,
Yes,
also
yes,
worked
ma'am.
for a regional planning district for over 18 years, so I have a little planning experience.
You have personally.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Well, to follow that up, based on the question that's come in and your interaction with your planning commission members, what would you say the functionality is of our planning commission? Not to put you on the spot.
I think they're highly functional. I do not know who currently on the commission has or has not taken the certified planning commissioner training. I cannot speak to that, but there are many resources available to them. I certainly would encourage them all to take it. And if they have taken it, like Mr. Davidson is back with us, and I've even considered taking it again as a refresher, just because we do have a lot going on, and I understand we may have another PMUD request coming up, potentially. You know, it's never a bad thing to refresh your skills. But I think we function quite well together.
Thank you. Further questions? Any follow-up?
Sorry, I'm going to
Ms.
ask a
Ms.
lot,
Roundtree.
but that's what tonight's for. So,
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Bowman, it looks like they found the map. And
Proceed.
Tammy, can you just point out for all of us as well as the public what you were talking about?
Would you repeat the question about what you're talking about?
Right, so this has to do with mixed use and how things are zoned on the parcel at question.
Yes, so this is our future land use map, and if you look at the red here, a majority of the area was designated on our future land use map as commercial mixed use. There is a single parcel right here that also is included in the application that is historic district residential, and then there's these 10 parcels right here that are a lavender color, and they are designated on the future land use map as the historic district mixed use. So the future land use map is really to identify these parcels that are currently designated with a different future land use as the commercial mixed use. But this entire red area that encompasses a majority of the parcels for the application was designated on the future land use map as commercial mixed use.
And so I'm sorry, because I don't have my definitions. Could you give us the Cliff's Notes version of the difference between commercial mixed use and historic mixed use?
Yes, so I can read it right off from our comprehensive plan. Commercial mixed use designation is given to the areas West Main Street, South Church Street as an extension of the fabrics of Smithfield's historic area. These are properties that were previously planned for commercial uses. However, this designation focuses more on walkable density, design features, and allows for a mix of uses that reflects the success of Smithfield's historic district in these additional areas. Development should take cues from the historic downtown in architectural character and materials, and address the improved streetscape of wide sidewalks, lighting, bicycle infrastructure, and ensuring that the public-facing details are high quality. Infill redevelopment should feature minimal to no setbacks. Buildings should be designed with limited parking and access provided in the rear, with primary access from pedestrians and bicyclists to their front. Balconies should be provided on apartments and rooftops utilized for amenities where possible.
Thank you.
Mr. Riddick?
Yeah, Mr. Bowman, Mayor Bowman, the important thing about what you're asking here is, and what she's trying to explain is, everything that's red right there, you've already approved on your future land use map as mixed-use development.
Right.
The applicant is making, their application is only for those lavender-colored lots right there, which don't match the red. And so it's not like they didn't come in and ask that all of it be changed to mixed use, because 95% of it already was.
And what's the green piece? Is that schoolhouse? Is that ours, like parks? Green is parks, right?
That's where the.
Schoolhouse Museum.
Oh, you mean the little tiny green piece?
Yeah.
That's the schoolhouse museum.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That is, you're right, that's the Schoolhouse Museum, that's town-owned and would remain that way, and it's not part of the rezoning application.
Thank you.
Thanks. One thing I forgot, which is significantly important, we do have the developer here as well, so any questions, not just of staff, but of the developer, when time comes around, you have that opportunity for certain as well. They do not have the opportunity to make a formal presentation, but they are here to answer the questions that you may proffer.
The only other formal presentation that we have planned for this evening, we invited Mr. Morello with the county's Economic Development Authority, he's also their Economic Development Director, to come and talk to council about the EDA, what it is, how it functions and operates, because it has been discussed as if this is approved, that the farmer's market facility may be managed by them, and when I say managed, I mean like ownership and leased. So he's here this evening to talk to council, give you a brief idea of what they do, who they are, and why they would be able to do that. The caveat I will say is clearly because nothing has been approved, there are no details because we're not at that point. But he is here this evening and is prepared to give that presentation to you as well if you wanted that before we opened up to
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, I do
Okay,
have
you
one
good?
question for the
Okay.
developer.
Right
As
now,
long as we're on zoning
right
and
ahead.
mixed use and that. But I also did want to make sure that Judy, I think I asked, was
She's
Judy
here.
here? Okay, because we may have some questions for her about the farmer's market, if I may. And then I also, in my 13 questions that were turned in, sorry, 11, there was only 11, not 13. I think I also am going to need to hear from the traffic expert. Is that person here?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, do you want to do that now, or would you rather hear?
I want to do
let's-
this part now.
Okay,
Okay. So as long as, Tammy, you're still up here, I got the paper yesterday. I actually get it online, so I get it in advance of when I get it in print, but this isn't about me. So there was an article in the paper, there was an ad that was purchased, I think by citizens on page 8, that addresses and draws comparisons, Tammy, between proposed Grange project and what was promised and proposed for Ben's grant, right? Did you see this?
Yes, yes,
You
I
saw
did.
it. Okay, so what I had hoped to do is clarify what the heck this means and be able to ask the developer, perhaps if someone from Land Planning Solutions is here, to ask them the difference, because what is on the top of this paper looks pretty good. Happy people walking, buildings that look interesting, a really nice development. And when you read it, it says it's from May 8th, 2009, and then what we got, which is not great. And there's pictures of that. So I did want clarification on that. I was around back then. At the time, I worked for Riverside. I think most people know that as a hospital administrator. And so I was for this development. I think that was when Armada Hoffler was the proposed developer. And I think that's what this picture represents. But I wanted clarification on why the difference between what was promised at Ben's Grant and what we got at Ben's Grant, specifically from the folks that know.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know that town staff can speak directly to it since it was a county project. but
No,
what-
that was my question.
Right.
Is anybody from Land Planning Solutions here?
Right, and if somebody is, what I was,
Yes.
I think you hit the nail on the head,
Okay.
it was from 2 different times.
Well, let's
But-
find out, because the assertion here is that,
Ms. Venable,
If-
can you come up, please?
the assertion here, I think, in the paper is that we approve something like this, that we're going to get what we got at Ben's Grant, and I need an explanation of that.
Before you start, can you please restate the question? I'm kind of at a loss of what the real question is, and
My question is, the development that was built at Ben's Grant, was Land Planning Solutions involved in that development as it exists for us today? And why the stark difference between what, we thought we were going to get and what we got,
based on the.
based on the
newspaper.
article in the paper that I found?
Right, well,
Yeah.
State your name, please.
my
for the
name is
record.
Melissa Venable. I am one of the co-owners of Land Planning Solutions.
Yes, ma'am.
In 2009, and actually prior to that, a little history, there were 2 rezonings that were proposed, one before 2009 for Armada Hoffler. That was withdrawn because it was quite contentious. And then the property owners, or the contract property owners, in 2008, 2009, came forward with a smaller rezoning. And in 2009, those images were part of our rezoning package. There was a pretty grand criteria set forth in 2009. That's not what was built. In 2014, another development group came forward and rezoned the zoning. So they came to ILOI, their Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors, and modified the 2009 package. I'm not here to tell you it was right or wrong. It was modified. Today, that group was kind enough to send to me those modifications. I have the rezoning in hand from 2014 and the modified development criteria also in hand. Needless to say, I didn't sleep very well last night when I saw that article because they missed quite a large component that in 2009 it was rezoning with very strict criteria, with very strict development criteria, architectural criteria. That was modified by another rezoning in 2014, 2015. And I have that here if you'd like it. I'm happy to distribute it. I had no involvement after 2009 with Ben's grant. I have recently had involvement with the Riverside Hospital site. We just got our site plan approval yesterday or today on the engineering only. That had nothing to do with Ben grant. That was only Riverside Hospital in case you see LPS pops up again. But LPS after 2009 had no involvement in Ben's grant, and it was rezoned another time after 2009 in 2014. And that rezoning package is here along with the development criteria, which was the standard that Ben's grant was built to. That took the 2009 rezoning off the table at that point. Does that make sense? Am I clear when I state that? So,
Yes.
long story short is the Smithfield Times was terribly misleading yesterday.
Well, I don't know, there was the Times, right? There was an ad that I think citizens
That's right,
purchased.
the ad was
Yeah.
misleading, I apologize.
I think people bought the ad, so I don't know that it's up to them, but thank you for the clarification. That makes me feel better.
Further questions of Ms. Venable?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes, sir. Counselor Smith?
Ms. Venable, were you actually involved in the Ben's grant approval of the rezoning? And then you stepped down, is that what you were
So in
indicating earlier?
2009 was part of the development team, similar to the Grange project. I was part of the development team. We put the graphics together. We did the site plan. Kimley Horn was also involved, and then the contract purchasers of the property, as well as several other consulting firms. So I was one of many of the components.
So you were
in
one of the many
2009.
people that were involved in getting it rezoned, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
All right,
But then
thank
it was rezoned another time after that, which subsequently was the package that they moved forward with in 2015. So once another rezoning comes on that property, comes to play on that property and is approved, the 2009 rezoning information is not valid any longer. And that would be up to you, or for instance, in this case, the Board of Supervisors at Isle of Wight to accept or deny. So that went through another public process. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. I was just trying to get your involvement, and then when you actually left,
After
it all got
2000,
started.
after the approval, it was 2009, so nobody
Right.
was developing much of anything in 2009. The project laid still for some time.
Right.
And then, for whatever reason, and we'd have to go to Isle of Wight and the Board of Supervisors, why it came back to them with a new package and new criteria set forth. But I had no involvement in it at that point in time.
So you had no involvement with the final package of what we have out there now?
That's correct.
Thank you. Any further questions of Ms. Venable? We hate to ask you to keep coming up and back, but we've got limited space or whatever, and as the questions come, we may ask you to come back. So,
Happy to move around.
thank you, yeah, thank you, ma'am.
I will leave this here if you.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'd like to see it, thank you.
Okay, I think, any other questions right now where we are? I think we want to hear from Mr. Morello. He's been kind enough to come tonight, and would love to hear from him.
And while he's coming up, I'll let you know too, the notes for what he's going to speak about are in your package. And again, they're included on the online package as well.
Thank you, Mr. Stallings. Mr. Morello, thank you very much. But if you would, please state your name for the record and your position, please.
Right, Chris Morello, Director of Economic Development for Isle of Wight County.
Okay, thank you.
And I hope you can hear me. It looks like it's on.
It's on.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor Bowman, members of council. I'd like to recognize, too, that our EDA Chairman Keene is in the audience as well. He's not here to speak, but he did wish to be here and attend because he knew I was going to be talking with you about this subject. And so I personally appreciate a great deal the opportunity to talk with you about and shed some light on the importance of EDAs, in particular in economic growth in Virginia, and ours in Isle of Wight in particular. So I'll tell you that my experience is that not every community takes advantage of the ability to form and utilize EDAs. And there are likely many localities in the Commonwealth that have them, but they just don't really use them or employ them to their full potential. So one of the things I was hoping to do tonight is kind of just shed a little bit of light on EDAs in general, maybe take a little bit of a mystery away that some folks may have, having heard about the EDA, but not being quite clear about what its real function is in the county. And kind of to mimic a little bit the caveat that Mr. Salling said, I think it's really natural and prudent for y'all to really wonder about the potential of the EDA involvement in this project, but I think it's also very important to note again that the Grange has not been brought up as a matter of business for the EDA, and so I'm not able to speak for the EDA on that matter or on behalf of them or otherwise represent what the EDA may or may not do on that subject in the future. And so I hate to be a little bit squishy on that, but I do want to still take the opportunity to talk about what an EDA can do, and perhaps in your own minds you can relate to what it does, and even what we do, to some possible opportunities in the future. So it's up to a locality to create one if desired. They're all guided and regulated equally in the Commonwealth by the same set of statutes. The makeup of their boards and directors can vary slightly. Ours is made up of 7 appointed directors. They're serving 4-year staggered terms, and each electoral district is represented, plus the 2 towns have representation. They exist as separate legal entities. They are political subdivisions, actually, of the Commonwealth, and it's their mission to really be able to act very nimbly and on behalf of the county to do really 3 major things, and that's create new jobs, expand the tax base, and diversify generally the economy of the locality. And in our case, that of course includes the towns of Windsor and Smithfield. So I and my staff in economic development in our department, we all wear a second hat in addition to our development staff hat. We serve the EDA as its staff. It does not have separately paid staff. It is the type of thing that authorities are capable of doing if they wish to do that, but that's not the case here. And so I actually serve as its secretary-treasurer. And so among some of the other wider duties for the county, like supporting our existing business tax base, the staff is responsible for attracting new businesses, and especially new businesses into our intermodal park, where we have a lot of investment and a lot of activity already. And we have to ensure that park is maintained and upkept well, and we coordinate infrastructure improvements for that park as may be needed on behalf of the county and the EDA. So aside from that, those things that I've already mentioned, what are some of the important functions and capabilities that an EDA can have as the Commonwealth allows them to do so to support their overall mission? It's a really important original purpose to note that they were set up many decades ago to help localities issue tax-exempt and even taxable revenue bonds. They needed localities need a thorough and duly formed development authority to do that. So the main purpose for that has been to help the private sector with expansions and really incentivize that and make it easier to do so. Again, localities needed a kind of a nimble approach to doing that with a business arm of the locality. So another is to allow for revenue bond proceeds to create infrastructure for industrial parks. In other words, that if you build it, they will come kind of approach with bonds paid for, because they're revenue bonds, by taxes generated over time is the approach. So outside of bond financing, in general, authorities accomplish economic development activities that are difficult, maybe very difficult or impossible for their elected bodies to undertake on their own. In many instances, this means acting much closer to the speed of business for partnering with the private sector on development projects and avoiding some pieces of the bureaucratic kind of red tape and encumbrances that can come along. And so again, being that business arm for the locality. And EDAs can take on a developer or quasi-developer role for a locality. They can, among other capabilities, enter into contractual agreements with private entities and even other public ones. They can acquire and develop land for industrial and business parks and for other economic development purposes. They can sell land for private development in accordance with its mission. They can build and/or manage land and facilities for sale or lease to private and nonprofit entities. And again, the Intermodal Park is a great example of that, with the EDA owning that territory. They can provide financing for facilities and machinery by a private company. They can provide incentives to attract new companies or to induce existing businesses and companies to expand, so we keep their future investments locally and the jobs in the county in particular. And they can act as a fiscal agent. Obviously, they act as their own fiscal agent, but they can also act as an agent in a multi-party agreement setup or scenario. So it's important to note that an EDA is not really able to operate a facility where they're doing anything really more than being passive landlord. In other words, the law basically tries to make certain that EDAs can't compete with the private sector at the business level. So an important thing to keep in mind. So they can build, they can sell, they can lease facilities, but you would not find them operating something or some business-like entity within those facilities, for example. An EDA can party to a master development agreement involving the locality, a group of localities, if that's applicable, and a private development partner. Such a master agreement governs all the subordinate agreements and ancillary agreements that might come with that, and all the understandings of the relationships between parties in a development arrangement. And that can get very complicated, but they are done, and they are done in a number of localities. But the important thing is that that master agreement really sets forward and provides the guidelines for expectations of performance, both by the private sector and the public sector, and any incentives or financial pieces that are important to codify up front in the master agreement. So they're usually revisited, of course, from time to time at set intervals, and of course they can be amended as may be necessary in the interim. Examples exist even nearby, such as in Newport News and in Virginia Beach, that's City Center and Town Center, respectively. I expect that many or maybe all of you have visited those, seen a movie in City Center, for example, where these mixed-use developments have occurred. In these cases, especially and in other locations, these are partnerships between a private master developer and the locality, and the public sector responsibilities are largely executed through their respective development authorities. Together, they strategically plan out phases of residential, commercial, office, retail, and the public streets, parking, and the public amenities that they would hope to have. And so these are examples where you have the EDA very much in the center of the development activity. So keep in mind that that's an important aspect of those two examples, and may or may not really, some of that may not apply to what you're thinking about right now. But if the partnership calls for it, an EDA can be the development partner that ensures that public infrastructure and public parking are provided and maintained. And in this way, and those kinds of developments I've already mentioned, this is a way of leveraging a greater amount of private investment than might otherwise be achieved. And the private sector is reaching toward profitability. So if the locality wants to be a partner and provide some pieces of the public infrastructure, like structured parking, then that is one way to be that partner. And often they're owned by the development authorities themselves, like a parking structure, very expensive to build. But if it's critical to the success of a development, especially a high-density development, to have free parking and people not having to walk a long way, and you have to have shared parking, for example, between the different uses, residential and commercial, with shifts between day and night, then it's often been found to be the best scenario for everyone that there's a public involvement in that to create free parking. So the locality can, of course, contribute. They may contribute to infrastructure maintenance improvements in public rights-of-way, public spaces and amenities. Again, that's if the arrangement calls for it. The partnership may call for condominiumization of certain buildings or lots, which can allow for privately owned spaces to exist within publicly owned facilities or land. So an EDA may also maintain ownership over some leasable space, for example, in a condominium regime, and rent it out, but could also sell that space if desired. So there are other related agreements in these kinds of kind of that are part of these regimes, these agreements, that might be necessary, for example, parking licensure. So you can imagine if there needs to be shared parking by different uses in a location, and it needs to be codified how that's done, then you might have a license agreement for parking amongst the parties. Just in terms of the general aspects of some of the ways that an EDA can be really helpful in a community and be a development partner, I want to kind of bring my comments back around to Isle of Wight and what we do here in particular to talk a little bit about the portfolio and the experience we have in Isle of Wight. So Isle of Wight is certainly a community that has utilized its EDA, and which makes a very interesting work, of course, for folks in economic development here. So currently, we, as you know, we own and maintain land for industrial development. There's over 1,300 acres at this time that are zoned and or slated for economic development in industrial, commercial. There are 3 separate purchase contracts in place right now for 260 of those acres. And those are with private partners agreeing to build in total over 1.5 million square feet over the next few years and potentially bring approximately 900 jobs to the county. So I want to apologize if you're following along in your document there. There's a $ sign in front of 1.5. Just erase that in your mind. It's square feet and not dollars. Thank you. The EDA also leases land for use by tenant farmers and hunt clubs on its undeveloped acreage. It currently leases 140 acres in 3 farmed areas, and these are under 3 separate leases. These are 3-year leases. It also leases 703 separate acres to a hunt club. To help ensure that the EDA receives market rents or close to market rents for its acreage in these lease arrangements, bids are received after public invitations for bids are solicited, and the top qualified bidder wins that lease. And so up until June of this year, we even had a rental house on Walters Highway, and we had been leasing it to a family, but that house is not leasable at this time because the land on which it sits is industrially zoned, and it's under contract for purchase. So, however, it's just another piece of our portfolio. Over many years, we've been leasing that structure since it's been owned by the EDA. So I hope I've shed a little bit of light, at least. I know it's a lot to throw out at one time on EDAs in general and ours in particular, and I do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about it.
Thank you, Mr. Morello. Any questions of Mr. Morello?
Mayor Bowman?
Ms. Roundtree?
Mr. Morello, can you explain what a CAM fee is and how that works? I mean, I've seen that referenced several times, and just in full transparency, because I sit on the Farmers Market Advisory Committee, board, whatever. I don't get to vote on anything, so I hesitate to call it a board, but, you know, all the people that put things in the market and that, we talked about a potential new farmers market, right? And so because of that, I think, at the time, Mayor Williams appointed Mr. Hall and I to a work group session about possible new farmers market. You were there. We talked about EDA. CAM fees came up. And could you just refresh my memory, like, what is that? How could it help? How does something like that help a community in this case to create what I think I just heard you say by definition is a public-private partnership?
Mm-hmm. Well, common area maintenance fees, there may be folks even around this table that have had a lot of experience more practically with common area maintenance fees. And in Isle of Wight and with our intermodal park, as an example, the intermodal park was, of course, developed with infrastructure and improvements, and there are common areas that are more or less shared within, especially Phase 2, where Cured Dr. Pepper is and Safeco products are. There's landscaping, there's grass that needs to be cut. That is not owned privately by those folks, but they have an expectation, and we have an expectation to upkeep and maintain and make sure we have a nice looking intermodal park, both for those tenants, but frankly to attract new development. And what we do is we assess and collect on an annual basis a common area maintenance fee from those folks who are private property owners there. And that goes into a fund, into the EDA, and from that fund, then we maintain the property. We do regular grass cutting, we do other kinds of maintenance. If there's a piece of the roadway that needs to be fixed, then the common area maintenance fees are the way that we fund those activities. So I think there are obviously other kinds of CAM fees, scenarios and situations that may involve residential, even park areas, perhaps a public marketplace, in the sense that you would have some expectation that that users of the facility, or somehow users and then perhaps even folks who are not necessarily affiliated or attached to the property, might be assessed a CAM fee because they gain a benefit and they're beneficiaries of a public place. And in a public-private partnership, CAM fees can be helpful to making sure that there are funds available to maintain a facility the way that that partnership wants it to be seen, the way the community might want to be, have it be maintained if it's going to be a public space.
So by definition, that's a public-private partnership.
The CAM fee itself would be a part, I think, of the public-private partnership, yes. You have to start with the master agreement.
Yeah.
And then other
So
things
do you
will-
remember those meetings, that work group meeting, that when we were hypothetically, I guess, talking about what could be the art of the possible? Yeah? Do you remember that any differently, Mr. Hall? Yeah? Okay. So like City Center, does their EDA own that parking deck?
Yes, the parking decks are owned by the EDA, that's correct.
So like, as the chair of the Parks and Rec Committee, and I am in receipt of I'll get to this later, but I am in receipt of an impact analysis and statement from Ms. Novak and how it affects my committee and Parks and Rec for the town, the proposed development. But anyway. With Parks and Rec, there's always like, you're given a gift, right? You have ball fields, you have beautiful parks, and then you got to cut the grass, right? And then you got to take care of stuff, and all of that costs money. And so in your like estimation, would a CAM fee be a way to pay for that kind of stuff? To make it looking good so that the town didn't have to bear and the taxpayers didn't have to bear the cost of caring for those things?
It is certainly a way. It may be a portion, it may not fully fund. It may be a piece of trying to make that work.
Well, that's what I remember from that work group session, so thank you for verifying that. Mr. Murillo, did you, as long as I still have the floor, did you have anything
Please.
else you wanted to tell us?
Not at this time, no. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay.
I do appreciate
I
it.
have a question.
Yes.
Madam Vice Mayor.
Hi, Chris, how you doing?
Hi.
Based on the information that you've shared with us, it sounds like this EDA vehicle is an ideal solution to what we'd like to see happen with the farmers market. The properties that you're listed here, they were all properties belonging to the county, and now they fall under the EDA?
Most of those properties, of course, these transactions were before my time. Some of them came into the county, perhaps most of them did, and then they were conveyed to the EDA for the purpose of industrial development. It might be the case that some were actually purchased by the IDA, the precursor to the EDA. It's the same, there was a name change in 2015 from IDA to EDA, but it's the same body.
Okay, because the reason I ask, in this particular situation that we're talking about, you got two governing bodies, the town and the county, and we want to, how would they get into the EDA?
Well, I think the master agreement would be the key to the partnership where the EDA and the two counties could form a partnership between themselves. There could be a partnership with the private developer as well. There could be two separate agreements. So I think the master agreement that I've been referring to is probably the first step to really codify the relationship. So the So just to, I wouldn't really use the words into the EDA, but more an arrangement, a legal arrangement, perhaps an MOU to start with, which to me sounds like a smart approach, to go down the road of a partnership.
Okay, I don't have a clear understanding of the makeup of the farmer's market, and this may be a question for Melissa, Tammy, I'm not real sure if you can help me.
I think it's
Any pos-
Judy,
Pardon me?
probably Judy.
Or Judy,
Judy?
yeah. I asked that Judy come. I was
Well,
gonna,
because as we know it, we're gonna have the farmer's market, and then on two ends of the farmer's market, there is gonna be commercial and retail space. So I guess my question is, the monies that the town and the county have decided to put up for the farmer's market, is the whole building called the farmer's market? And will our contribution just pay for the farmer's market portion, or will it also pay for the commercial space and the retail space? Who is that? Is that Melissa? No, that's Judy.
That's Judy.
Oh, okay.
You state your name for the record, who you represent, please, ma'am.
Judy Winslow, Director of Tourism for Smithfield and Isle of Wight.
Thank you.
And just to answer your question in as fewer words as I possibly can, the public portion would be one end capped, and the center portion, that would be the primary farmers market area. The other end cap would be owned by Smithfield Station, perhaps.
Okay, well, those entities, are they leasing or are they purchasing their space?
Smithfield, well, the restaurant would like to purchase. That has not been fully agreed upon yet.
Okay, and the other end where the retail space is that purchased as well, or is that lease space?
That is leased space.
That's lease space. But the public funds are only going to the farmer's market portion?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Further questions or any follow-up? or-
yeah, I mean, before Judy steps
Yes, Ms.
down.
Roundtree.
Mayor Bowman, with regard to the indoor-outdoor market space, Judy, we do have some citizens' questions specifically about the cost of that and how it can possibly be, funded. There's questions in here about, how can we possibly pay for this and have it if there's 75 vendors and they're paying a little bit, for what seems like a lot. Can you just speak in general to all of those concerns and common objections as you know them? And also a little bit, because again, I do serve on the advisory committee, I guess you call it. Can you speak to what the current vendors think about a proposed, more permanent indoor-outdoor space? Thank you.
Yeah, the way that this is being considered is that there would be 24 main farmers market spaces within the main portion of the building, 16 undercover spaces directly adjacent to that building, plus that entire field. We currently charge $75 a year plus 5% or $15, whichever is more. And we don't have space for all of those vendors. We would certainly with all of that space. Not all of it would be undercover, but certainly some of it would be. We anticipate that the farmers market would be managed exactly the way it is now, because we're looking at another entity probably dealing with ownership, whereas we would deal with the management. We would not want to, since the building would already be paid for by Isle of Wight County, the town of Smithfield, the developer, and of course the restaurant, that there would be no mortgage on that building at that point. So the vendors would not be burdened with that to pay for. So we would keep that agreement. It might change slightly, but we would certainly not want to burden the farmers with paying for that building. What we would want to do is to gain more money from being able to have farmers markets on more days and through more months, because a lot of it would be undercover. I don't know if you were at the market last weekend, but it was so hot, no one came. In this particular type of environment, people would still come. Also, in the winter, we would be able to carry through. So we would be able to add maybe an evening market. But in addition to that, we don't expect that building would be, empty a whole lot, because it would give us an opportunity to program that building on a regular basis, which we do all the time, but we don't have a space to do it. Plus, it would be an absolutely wonderful opportunity to gain some additional revenue through event rental space.
I'm thinking of like, the Charleston downtown market, where some of it's indoor, outdoor market space like that. Yeah.
And I can just tell you, the end cap that we're talking about, we don't know really how many retail spaces would be in there at this point, but it's been designed at this point. That will all be determined by cost moving forward. But at this point, we're looking at 2 to 3 probably permanent retail spaces in there, plus a farmer's market office, storage, a walk-in cooler, and then there would be an upstairs area for additional storage or perhaps even a rooftop garden.
So I do want to ask you about cost, but first, your current vendors, what do they think about moving the farmer's market? Because another concern I've heard from the public, and then, businesses downtown is like, oh, if you move it too far down, are people going to get back up to the Christmas shop, right? Are they going to go to the Merc? Are they going to go to Pearl's, eat at Taste Smithfield? Is that too far to walk?
I hope not. I mean, part of why we have a farmer's market is to sell healthy food, so that people will. And part of what we're dealing with here is creating a walkable community. We want it to be walkable, and we want it to be walkable from one end to the other of Main Street, of that Main Street area. It's not that far, but we have already anticipated adding some shuttle service. We already purchased a small limo golf cart that we would run a perpetual shuttle for folks that didn't want to make that walk. We do anticipate making sure that people have the opportunity to shop the entire street, not just the farmer's market and not just the historic district. And, our anticipation is that they literally flow one into the other.
You said you already purchased a golf cart, a limousine golf cart?
We did.
Was that through a grant or?
No, it came from our general
Budget.
fund budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how about the iRide shuttle and like parking? That's another concern I've heard is, if there aren't, I don't want to talk about that right now, but if there aren't enough parking spots for the whole proposed development of the Grange, do you think that, because I've been thinking about this a lot, the commuter lot, is that an option for parking and shuttling or no? For events?
Potentially, we use it right now.
You do?
Quite frankly, for large events because we don't have enough parking downtown. We use that. We use the school, and we shuttle people with iRides all the time. We don't do it on a regular basis. It could potentially be done. Quite frankly, I believe the development, as it's currently designed, has just as many spaces as we currently have.
So you shuttle people now from West Side?
No, just during large events.
You said the school, though. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, West Side.
Yeah. And I think on the weekends, like sometimes Smithfield Center's used, right?
All the time.
For parking. All right, so with regard to cost, in the paper today, it says something about taxpayer funding is being provided to allow the farmer's market to be incorporated in the indoor $7.8 million multi-tenant building. Over $2 million of the cost remains unfunded. So I'm not expecting, Judy, that you can answer that question, but can someone speak to the economics of funding the farmer's market and how that's planned right now? Is that an accurate statement? I guess I'll ask. That's probably Melissa again.
I think what I can talk about with that is both the town and the county have currently committed $1.4 million. The land has been committed and $1 million by the developer, and that's what we're looking at right now. And I can't speak for either council or the board to see if they would want to put any more money into it. That's not my job.
And what's the current cost proposed to build the farmer's market?
I do not know.
Does anybody know?
The other caveat I would add is that
Just-
the restaurant piece had agreed to pay for their build out as well. So none of that included.
So
building
does the
commercial.
1.4 and the 1.4 and the $1 million donation and the property,
Does not include the restaurant at all.
Doesn't include, right, but is all that enough to build what's been designed for the space?
Mr. Luter indicates that he wants to answer that
Okay.
question. So with
I'm
that,
fine with
Mr.
that.
Luter, please answer that question and stick to that question, please. State
Joe
your
Lu-
name, please.
Joe Luter, we do not have hard cost yet for the farmer's market. We only have estimates, and based upon where we sit today, we're very close to having full funding.
Very close to full funding, as it's currently.
But again, in today's environment, with
Yeah.
construction costs being as volatile as they've been, and without a hard set of plans, we do not have hard cost.
Yeah, don't I know it?
As a
Everything goes
follow-up,
up.
do you have a budget for that at the present time? Or would you basically tailor your site plan ultimately on, as you said, the variables that you just discussed?
I think that ultimately, we need to sit down as a collective group between us, the town, and the county, and go through what is currently proposed, decide whether that is the right plan. As was discussed, Mr. Pack's not here, but there's a big unknown as it pertains to the restaurant. That's a 6,000 square foot restaurant. And so he needs to be included in the conversation, but there's a lot of work to be done to identify hard costs associated with the market.
Okay. A follow-up that, Mr. Morello, along that line, you had discussed bonds early on. Is that a potential mechanism to fund the delta if a project such as this were ultimately designed on the drawing board and things like that, and we came up with X number of dollars short? Are there bonds available to fund a scenario such as this?
I mean, I can only answer hypothetically that.
And that's a hypothetical question.
That's a hypothetical answer for you would be, yes, I think it's possible, but I got to stop right there. And again, that would be an EDA decision. And
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just asking.
Yeah.
All right, let me rephrase that. Have there been scenarios in the past in other localities where that scenario came up, and bonds were used to handle the delta as far as a project like that's concerned?
Yes, I'm sure that there have been. I don't have personal knowledge of any of them, but I mean, in my recollection, I can think.
And based on the statute that you have, is that an allowable?
It would be.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't want to speak for Judy, but in prior conversations that Judy and I have had about funding, she believes, and she can step up to here to confirm it, that there could be available funds for such a project.
Well, that's why I asked Mr. Morrow. That's fine. Thank you.
I think if I could add to
But
that,
just-
just
Mr.
one other thing having to do with the statutes, because that would need to be a detailed understanding what the statute says about how you can use those bond funds is really important, because ultimately, I think we're talking about a public space,
Right.
not a private space.
Right.
And to the degree that's really, really important to answer you well, I think that, that's the piece that needs to be looked at. It's possible that this project as eventually a public space, it may not be possible to have the bond funding for that. So that's just something I didn't do any homework on, not having needed to do at this point. So I think it's important to have that in your mind, that it's possible that it's not possible.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay. I have Vice Mayor and then Ms. Roundtree. Vice Mayor?
I have a hypothetical question. Mayor Bowman asked if you have a budget for the farmer's market, and I know due to the volatility of construction materials or whatever, I'm sure, based on original plans, that it's going to be higher now. But in order not to incur any debt, are you open to scaling down that project?
It's always been our intent to build what you all want. This building is a building that the town and the county will ultimately own. And so we will build what you all want.
Okay.
We will not own it, We will get it built for you, we will help fund it, and it will ultimately belong to you all.
Okay.
Further questions? Ms.
No,
That's
that's it.
Ms. Roundtree?
I think that was a great question, Valerie, because I'm of the same mind as where you were going with that. You know, if we can't afford it, then, I mean, you know, are your eyes bigger than your stomach kind of thing. Mr. Morello, is the EDA currently in Isle of Wight considering bond funding with any other entity? I mean, are you doing it now, and/or are you considering it for any other entity, public or private?
We're doing it now. We're doing it for Richard Bland College in a 20-year bond program that's a little over halfway through. And so those are, where that is, and the one that we're contemplating now, which is not public information, but I can speak kind of generally about the fact that we're considering it. And the board will consider it at their next meeting. Both of these are known as conduit bond financing. The EDA acts as a conduit. It's been enabled to do so by the legislature to issue tax-exempt bonds, or taxable if the case may be, but these are tax-exempt ones for certain uses. In Richard Bland College, that situation was Richard Bland College wanted to build dormitory space, needed to find relatively cheap money to do that, figured out how that the EDA, this EDA, could be helpful with that. So again, conduit bond financing. So the same with the one that we think that the board will be contemplating at the September 12th meeting, and the same sort of scenario. So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Any further questions at this time of Mr. Morello? Really appreciate the time that he has
Thank you.
given us.
My pleasure.
Chris, thank you, sir. Mr. Stones, do you have anything further before I move along for questions?
No, sir, nothing formal other than just, again, that we've got multiple department directors here, so if you have specific questions for any of them, they're here and available.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'd like for Jack to address something.
Well, you're up. Guess what? You're
Oh,
up.
Valerie gets to go first?
Yes, she does. We're coming around.
Okay.
But that's
He's the
not my
vice mayor.
question.
I love
That's
it.
not my question.
I love that.
But no, it doesn't have to be.
Jack-
Mr. Oh, you're there. Okay.
Jack, can you expound on utilities? I know that there's been several questions about who's going to pay for that, if what's proposed in the project. Do we have sufficient utilities to be able to handle this size project? Can you tell me where we are with that, or do we know that yet?
And there's no microphone. Oh, you go. Good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All we do at this stage of the process, and I think that may have been lost in previous meetings, is we only look at capacity for water and sewer. And yes, ma'am, to answer your question, we do have sufficient capacity. As to the fine nitty-gritty details, we're not to that part of the process yet, if that makes sense.
If there needs to be an upgrade, who pays for that?
The developer.
The developer pays for that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You're still up.
Oh, okay. I forgot what my other question was now. There are two other issues that are outside, well, one of them is really outside of the developer. It's not one of the SUPs that he's asking for, is Mr. Linier's BMP pond situation. And Melissa, I think that Mr. Linier posed some questions and you addressed them.
Come forward, Ms. Venable, please.
I had actually called Tammy for some clarification because on the alternative one, the options that you gave, it sounded like there was going to be an underground proposed BMP pond on the project. And when Tammy got back with me, that's not the case. And I think in that second sentence on the alternative one, you listed that, you know, the request that was being asked to do an underground BMP pond right there on Main Street was not possible because of the makeup of the soil. Okay, so there is not an underground BMP that's actually planned for the project itself?
There is. Thank you.
It is.
Would you mind pulling up the plan? So we've had a soil study done on site. This was well before we proposed ponds in specific areas. We did have a drainage map drawn. We've drawn up a drainage map as a company and seen where the drainage divides go. We've gone over this in some of the planning commission meetings, and I'm just going to have him pull up the plan here. So the geotechnical report showed us or told us that, see the large parking area? Oh, I even have a pointer. This is a lot of talent here. The large parking area here, and this part of the soil on this end of the site has some sandy makeup. With sandy makeup, we can deal with quality and quantity of a stormwater management facility, which by regulation we have to deal with. Stormwater management ponds are to deal with both quality of water, so we can retain and clean the water before we release the water off the site, and then obviously the quantity or the amount of water we have to retain as well. So we know that in this portion of the site we have some sandy materials. We know at this part of the site it is clay, and with clay matter we can deal with quantity, but we can't deal with quality. We can't retain the water there and clean it and then have that leave the site. Now, there's experts that know a lot more than me, so I had them review all the information and hand it back to me as we looked at Mr. Lanier's questions. So he gave us some alternative ideas and alternative plans. These weren't our alternative ideas and alternative plans, but we have talked from the beginning of this project that we would be able to retain some of the water under this area here for both quality and quantity, which allowed us to pick up quite a bit of the water up front. But as you know, and I've said this over and over again, we have a drainage issue here. One of the other alternatives talked about taking this water and bringing it back here before we released it out this way. And we all understand gravity, and again, you don't have some of the knowledge and some of the base information that we have, but we know that the lowest point of the site here is an 18 elevation, 18 to 26 through this area. Back here, it's about a 33, 34, up to 37-foot elevation. So what we don't want to try to do is somehow pump the water back here to a higher elevation than to take it out and again down the street. So that was one of the other alternatives. And obviously his concerns are our concerns. Safety was mentioned over and over again and has been throughout this process. And we're also concerned of safety, landscaping, and creating a park-like feature. So we have detailed plans, and we've shown them previously if you'd like me to, but we have plans of fencing this pond area, having trails, having very heavy landscape, specifically with a thorny bush hedge, so that this isn't a welcoming pond to try to enter into, and instead you're not going to want to enter into this pond, but you're going to want to look at it. It's going to be pretty. It's going to be well landscaped and well maintained. And I included in the response to some of Mr. Lanier's questions, some very pretty or attractive pond or park type areas that are part of communities that are stormwater management ponds but act as park features, and that's what we envision here for this particular location. I would, if we get into the engineering this and there's an alternative or there's a better way to do it, because as we've mentioned over and over again, this is a rezoning. We're not into final full engineering yet, but we do have information about geotech, about soils, and about topography that's telling us from our years and years of experience that it's going to be hard to do an underground pond in this particular location because of topography and because of the soil type.
Okay, you answered my question, because that's what.
I didn't mean to be so long-winded.
That's the conversation that me and Mr. Lanier had, but when I asked Tammy, it was different. That's why I asked for clarification.
Yeah, I think there was some confusion that because there were 3 alternatives from his letter, I think Tammy had thought I was talking about the 3 different ponds on site, but I was very specifically addressing the 3 alternatives. But again, nothing is finalized for engineering at this point, and I want to give you the information that I have. This is just from studies that we've done thus far. This is the information and how I can respond to this. Can it be better or different once we get to final engineering? Possibly, but again, I would need to give you my honest opinion. And my honest opinion is I think it will be very hard for us to do an underground pond in this location.
Okay, but, well, the thing that I discovered that was new to me, I don't recall any discussion around an underground BMP under the parking lot where the apartments are concerned. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, in one of our first presentations, we talked about it, but it's also part of our drainage analysis that was submitted with the beginning, early on package. When we talk about utilities and drainage, we talk about that being a possibility in that document.
Jack, where the proposed BMP pond is at that lowest point on Main Street, and one of the things that Melissa says is with that BMP pond built there, that it will also alleviate some of the flooding that we have now. Are our utilities capable of passing the water, holding the water and passing it off the way it should?
And to follow up, compatible.
We would have to see more of the design. We don't foresee any issues at this stage. No, ma'am.
You don't?
No.
Okay, all right, thank you. The other concern, this is not you, Melissa. The other concern is the archaeological report that had been done, is that we felt like it was limited. However, with that limited test, there was nothing found. And I see Jennifer sitting in the audience, and I know from the Isle of Wight Museum, they would like more extensive research done in that area. And I feel the same way. I know building and excavations done all the time in Williamsburg where they had to halt projects. But I will tell you, there has been a lot of concern about burial grounds there. Now, somebody had given me some history on the Pierceville family and that Pierceville property, and I discovered that they own 300 acres of land. I called a friend of mine who is a pretty good historian, and I asked him, I said, did that Pierceville project extend over to Goose Hill Creek? Goose Hill. Well, he didn't know the answer to that. He suggested that I get Seeger Cofer de Shields' pictorial of Smithfield, and today I perused it. That Pierce family owned 300 acres of land that included Goose Hill Creek. Mike just told me at a couple of meetings ago that there's a grave there. I rode over there, there is. So to me, this archaeological dig that we're talking about, we don't know where to dig. And based on what the developers have done, they did a limited report. But prior to that, there have been 2 other reports done too, and nothing's found. So not only did the Pierce family own the Pierceville project where it is, it extended down to Gray Street, where the Grove is, where the Stevens lived, that I never knew was part of it. And in addition to that, the Riverview community was part of that too. So, I don't want to see any graves disturbed, but I think that we're looking for a needle in a haystack, and the haystack seems to have gotten larger. How do we know? There's one grave over in Goose Hill Creek. That area where it's protected, how do we know that there aren't other graves there? So we made assumptions that the graves were probably close to the plantation. We don't really know that. And I just wanted to bring that up because everybody seemed to be focusing on where the Pierceville farm is. And those graves, if there are any, could be anywhere in that vicinity. They are my questions.
I'm going to defer to Jennifer.
That's not a question. I just wanted to make that observation. But I do agree that before construction is done in that area, that we may want to look at doing a little bit more extensive, whatever you call it, monitoring there for any burial grounds.
Can we bring Jennifer, can you come up a minute, please? Because that's kind of, if I could frame a follow-up maybe, if that would be okay, Madam Vice Mayor.
Yes.
State your name.
Good evening. Jennifer England, Director of the Isle of Wight County Museum and Historic Resources Manager for Isle of Wight County.
The question that I've got, I think it runs, dovetails with Madam Vice Mayor. There had been a request for I wouldn't call it an advanced study, but a more thorough,
Right.
and it was actually a term used.
Yeah, a Phase 1 archaeological
Correct.
report. A lot of times when
Can you
developments...
explain to me
Sure.
what that is
Sure.
and why you think that's necessary? And why limited to here versus, where? Go ahead.
Sure. Usually when developments come in, and there is a particular patch of land that is going to be developed, a Phase 1 archaeological report or starting with a cultural resources survey is rather standard because you want to know the area of potential effect, what we call the APE, and if there are things perhaps on that plot of land that may or may not reveal more about county history as it stands. So like I said, a lot of times when you have these developments, like when the county is, of course, pulling in a lot of reports right now for potential solar farm use. So a lot of times we will get, in these cultural resource surveys, discussion of what has been taking place on that land before the development comes in. And, in various cases, sometimes you have a lot of farming that's been going on. Sometimes there are structures there. But you do want to determine what may or may not be there before you proceed. So usually most developments start with a cultural resource survey, which will provide you more information than just graves. You're looking for structures, and other sites that may have been there. And of course, that is inclusive of them going back through the record and determining what those, who owned the land and what it was used for in the past. So if you have cultural resource survey comes in with a potential development plan, it may be because of the history of that site, you want something a little bit more deeper, like a cultural or a Phase 1 archaeological report. The report that came in was specifically, as you said, looking for grave sites. And it seems that it's usually, like I said, rather standard that we ask for something a little bit more in depth to determine what might be, out there or not.
So you're looking for artifacts too?
It depends. Usually what they do is they will, of course, research the survey or, consult maps, figure out what had taken place in the past. And, they will dig what they refer to as test pits and then determine, usually they plot those out in a very big grid over the entire property. And then, determine, if things are coming up that are culturally significant or not. And then based on that report and that analysis, then they'll determine, oh, well, we should do a little bit more digging here, or there's really nothing here of interest that could be considered National Register of Historic Places worthy, and then, you can move on. But it's just good to have it as a base before you move forward with a big project.
Are you familiar with the other two testings that were done on that Piercefield property?
The ground penetrating radar, yes, I've seen the report.
Not this current report. There were two other testings that were done.
Pedestrian surveys, yes, those two.
Yes.
Oh, that one. I have not seen that one specifically, but usually, a lot of times, if there is a big project at hand, sometimes they will go ahead and research. They'll pull that old survey and then pull it into the new analysis.
Okay.
Any further questions, follow-up for Jennifer?
Do we know,
Ms. Roundtree?
thank you, do we know what the 1993 study said? I mean, do you have a copy of that, Melissa?
I have a copy of it, I don't have it with me, but I am happy to email it to you. It's on record with
EDHR and BCROS.
and no further investigation was requested after that.
Okay.
And given your revelation about the 300 acres, before the other developments were built, did they go through the same kind of studies?
I think
Like
things
Goose
have
Hill and
changed.
Riverview?
I just think things have changed. Mike
They
Mayhew
didn't
can
do it
answer
back then.
that.
I can confirm about the grave over at Goose Hill. It's a site where 3 people are buried. One of them was a 21-year-old slave girl that actually worked on the farm. I don't know about the other 2 bodies, but it was believed she died in childbirth. So The markers are still there. I say markers, the only marker that's there. I know this pretty well because my brother owned a piece of property beside it when he built his home over there. So my thinking would be that there probably wasn't even a road through there at one time, and that was all part of the farm, and they just picked out some area to have a burial site for whoever that was part of the farm.
Yeah, and that's how it is on our farm. We have a Virginia Century farm over 100 years, and there's a grave site with 4, the same family members in it. And it wasn't necessarily by where the house was, I understand, either, on our farm.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Riddick?
Well, with respect to this property, everybody has a pretty general idea where the old buildings, the manor house and all the farm buildings used to be. The rest of that farm has been cultivated for well over 100 years, and the likelihood that there's much out in the fields is pretty slim. That's my experience. So when they do this, they kind of have a reasonable idea where to look, and it's not likely that the fields that have been cultivated, if there was anything there, it's probably long gone.
Yeah, I think it's a likely area for relic hunters to have been probably across it or whatever, knowing that they did. Thank you, Jennifer. Madam Vice Mayor, are they your questions, ma'am,
That's it.
at the present time? Mr. Smith?
Yes, I have a question. I guess Tammy can help me answer this, and maybe Miss Melissa can help me also. Is this
Ms. Venable?
Ms. Venable? This one-page document we have, the Grange at 10 in Maine, this one right here, is this the only thing that's been entered as a proffer?
Yes, sir.
I mean, do we have images of what buildings are gonna look like and so forth and so on? I'm reading that it looks like to me this is the only page that is reference to a proffer as part of this.
Of what it's going to look like?
Yes.
Right, and that's for, in this particular project or this particular rezoning, Bihar will have full, how do I say it? Bihar will have full ability to review every building on the site, and we actually extended the historic district in our proffers so that Bihar could have an opinion on every building here. Now, I'm hopeful that we don't have to come with every single lot, and then we can come to Bihar with a submission of multiple buildings at one time. That's if the zoning gets approved. But Bihar has the ultimate say, so we can't really proffer something to you right now. We have to send it to Bihar and go through this process again and get their opinion. That's why none of the buildings are proffered at this point, because they've already told us we have the ultimate authority.
So this is the only,
That's the only
Profferable page we
graphic
have.
proffered at this
Right.
point, yeah.
But there's also a list of properties.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, then
so
there's a
I
list
know
of
there's a
properties, but
list,
you
yeah,
meant
This is the
graphically?
only tangible thing that we can see as far as the layout.
Right, we've given you ideas, but again, she was very, very clear during planning that she was coming back. So,
Well, when she says she's coming back.
so
Let
we
me ask-
understand that the architecture, at this point, we can't proffer it because they've said, we want you to come back to Bihar and work through all the elevations with them.
So
If
would-
it's approved.
So my question for Julia, is that fine?
Ms. Hilliard.
If you review this, are you looking to review each individual homes or a block of homes, or have you decided how you're gonna handle that moving forward?
We have not really had a lot of conversation about it in Bihar, other than in general, I've kept them up to date about the process, because the rezoning would have to get approved first. I mean, otherwise, it's a moot point
Right.
for us to even be concerned, but they know that it's, it's happening. We have typically seen elevations for development, like a series of elevations for homes in the past that would be considered for things like the hotel and the market and those individual structures, the apartments. Those, I would imagine, would be considered individually.
So you still have control over the parts of the commercial ends of it too, right?
Correct.
The appearance of that.
Right, because one of the proffers was that the whole development would be under BHAR standards.
Also, just to add to that, it's also located in the entrance corridor overlay. And so the commercial structures and the multifamily residential would also need to go before Planning Commission for their review and approval of the elevations, colors, and materials as well.
Right, so that's a whole other layer.
Well, the whole site plan will
Right. Right, so that's
go before the planning.
set of checks and balances.
The site plan is the layout and the roads and the streets and all that sort of thing.
And I think that's what this document is in.
This is the general concept plan.
Correct.
And the proffer says that it will be in substantial conformity. In other words, they're telling you that's what we want to build right there. It's not engineered, it's not designed down to the, you know.
If I understand correctly, it's the footprint layout for the zoning
Correct.
application.
That's correct. But your point was the site plan, which is all the technical stuff, that absolutely goes to Planning Commission.
Which Julia also is a part of and
Correct.
takes very seriously. You can't hang tight. Just, Mr. Smith, you have further questions?
No, I do not, thank you.
Mr. Hall?
No, I don't have any. I'm pretty satisfied with what I've heard going on. And it answered my question.
All right. Ms. Roundtree?
Okay, well, so I took the time to document 11 different things that I wanted to ask and get answers to, so I'm going to start at the top, if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And just so everyone knows, where I got these kind of questions was directly from my notes from the night of the public hearing. So I did take notes on what citizens said and what their concerns were. I have now, Michael, gone through the additional questions that were submitted today, and I appreciate staff's answers in the different colors on these. And you said these are already published for the community?
Yes, ma'am, they went live on the town's website as soon as they came to council.
Okay. So before I start with number one of the things that I had asked was additional input from department heads and directors about impacts of the Grange to the development. I had been previously told there would be no impact for the Grange development on my committee, which is Parks and Rec. I did receive this from Amy today, so has this been entered?
I haven't
Yeah.
seen.
Oh, you haven't seen it either? All right, well, I'm going to read it then. The impact of the Grange development to Smithfield Park system. Amy thinks more people enjoying the parks is always a good thing. Maintenance impact should be minimal, which I'm happy to hear because that's something we hear quite often is about, like, again, mowing the grass and maintenance and all that. Windsor Castle Park, and then she goes on for the 4 large developments that Amy has purview over. Windsor Castle Park, more park patrons using the park for recreation will have minimal impacts on maintenance. Higher visitation numbers are always a plus for parks when researching grants and similar opportunities. Luter Sports Complex, more young people registering for youth sports is a great thing for community and our local youth recreation leagues. The rec leagues have already made it clear the challenges of limited field availability, so growing the facility and adding athletic fields will be necessary for the future. Clance Park Fishing Pier and Boat Ramp. This park is already heavily used for boat traffic, especially on the weekends. However, more use of the boat ramp does not create more maintenance. And finally, Smithfield Center and Windsor Castle events. Hopefully the additional residents will mean increased event booking for our 2 venues. The hotel at the development will be a welcome addition for our event guests. And I know from speaking to Amy in the past, often use of the Smithfield Center and renting it out to out-of-town groups, right, and conventions is sometimes limited, therefore limiting our profitability as a town because of lack of places to stay, hotel rooms and that. So that was from Amy, the Parks and Rec Director. I did want to ask about the schools, as long as we're on the departments and their, the impact. And I think what I understand is that the schools, Amy Ring, I think is the name that I heard, had submitted some additional comments about the impact of the proposed development on schools.
Yes, that is an updated enclosure number 4 that was included with the staff report following the enclosures.
And what did that say, Tammy? Just because I don't have that in my packet, I don't think. It may be online.
I was going to say, I'm trying to, the cost per student is an average cost of the middle schools.
I can't hear you real well, sorry.
The cost per student is an average cost of the middle school's existence at the time. She has it broken down for the CIP that it's projected at a 299 residential units will generate 12 middle school students in excess of the existing capacity of the middle school. This projected cost to increase capacity for 12 additional students is $548,869 or $1,835.68 per household at $299. That would be after a credit is applied for future debt service contributions made as a portion of future tax payments.
Interesting, that was almost the amount they overspent this year, but anyway. Were there any additional proffers from the developer or anything that was entered as a result of that information?
Glad you asked. There's a couple of things I want to take note of, and yes, the answer to the question is yes. Amy Ring also went on to note that it was a good thing to have the extra trail system, and she wanted to know the linear feet of the trails on site, and the rear, just in the rear area of the trails that we're proposing are 2,700 linear feet, which is just over half a mile. She also asked about the amount of park area at the front of the site, which you all, I think, have documented, but we're at approximately 2.12 acres of giving for the farmers market area, Central Green, Recreation Area, and Pond Park that's up front. But then that same enclosure, number 4, goes on to talk about what Tammy just noted. So we really literally had to, this was yesterday we received this information.
Okay.
So you don't have it in the proffer statement, but we are willing, if you would consider, to put forth the proffer that addresses her school numbers. We also took that as an opportunity. We had talked about this. We stated it in our last meeting that we would be giving $100,000 to the Smithfield Volunteer Fire Department. So we've included that as a proffer to consider as well. And then the parking spaces, Valerie had sent me an email because she didn't note or didn't see that we actually proffered the shared agreement with the Main Street Baptist Church, so we've added that as a proffer as well. So I have that here, and I'd like to distribute it to you for consideration. To add to the proffers, we can't consider that, I don't think, tonight, because tonight's a work session, but it's, again, for you to consider, and it gives you at least some time to look at it. Should I? And there's multiple copies here. So this addresses the school the school deficit that we received yesterday, the $100,000 for the fire truck, and then a statement in regard to the shared parking with Main Street Baptist.
Mr. Smith has a question.
Sure,
Follow-up here.
thank you.
Mr. Smith?
The question I'm seeing is that it looked like to me that some of the schools were fine and then the others were not, so over too many students. Then also the cost of a new bus or two or whatever it needed for that, plus the drivers for that. So it has been impacted, but what I did not like about how it was approached was as if the other things that have already been approved down the pipeline, that would take care of all of that. So that would, in other words, you wouldn't be addressing any of that because of stuff that's already been approved that might be built out. That would generate the revenue to do the school buses, the extra drivers, extra teachers, or whatever they might need.
So I have a hard time going through the fiscal impact analysis too, because there's a lot of information in that. But if you specifically go to the school section, the methodology, we've taken monies that this project is projected to raise, and those school bus impacts that were stated early on in the process, those costs have been withdrawn from our revenue. So that's actually proven in our fiscal impact analysis. So we show that the revenue from this project gives money, gives funds for the school buses that you're noting, as well as the drivers, I believe. But it's the 2 different buses, and it's noted in our fiscal impact that those costs are being handled with this project. And then this, what we got yesterday, is additional to that, and that's why we have to proffer the funds for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Roundtree, continue,
Okay.
please, ma'am.
Thank you. So now, on to number 1. The biggest question that a lot of people talk about is traffic, right? So I don't know if I know your traffic professional is here. I'd like to call her up and I don't know if you have slides about this, but I really want to understand what all the terms mean and kind of how, you know, traffic was being considered. I think I've been reading the proposed development at full build-out, which I don't know how long that takes, generates an additional like 5,500 trips a day or something. And so my concern, and just really what I want you to speak to, is everything that you did with VDOT and all the reviews in that, and how that affects, you know, what is going to be the true impact. And when you say, you know, we went back and forth with VDOT and they had no additional comment, does that mean that they think that what you've proposed is going to handle the 5,500 trips? You know, I kind of want that assessment because I'm not a traffic engineer.
Certainly.
Yes, ma'am. Could you state your name?
Yes, Karen McPherson, 317 Office Square, Blaine, and Virginia Beach. And Tiff, can you go back to the initial site plan? The original site plan. I don't even know if it started there. Yeah, that was it. Go back to the aerial, please. So if you can look initially, the concept plan, and this was even further back. I don't know if I can explain where we actually started, but first of all, our first official meeting with VDOT was July 27th, 2022. And that is by VDOT policy, we have a meeting and it's called a pre-scoping form. It's a 5-page document and you have to attend all stakeholders. So VDOT's residents who was there, the district was there, your town staff was on the call, as well as Isle of Wight, and we were on the call as well. And we went through our standard of practice where we say, this is what the concept is going to be, the number of single-family homes, apartments, retail, farmers market. So all these land uses, we go through all these assumptions, how much traffic we're going to do. For each different land use, we came and made our recommendations on travel patterns for a residential use is different from somebody coming to and from a hotel. So it was very granular, very technical assumptions. How much traffic, where are they coming and going to? The VDOT identified the study area, meaning the main intersection at Main and 10, all the driveways along Main Street, the proposed access north of Cary, and then there was quite the discussion on Route 10. And from VDOT's perspective, that is a limited access highway. So initially, we had proposed a right-in, right-out, and the town was in support of that. And we've got a strong statement from VDOT that this should be proposed as a right-in only. It was a limited access break, and they wanted to minimize the impacts to the break. So they only wanted us to evaluate a right-in only. So that was from the very beginning. We had a long discussion about access on Main Street. Where you see our Grange Street access initially was much closer to the intersection. And VDOT has an access management policy where you have to be a certain distance from the signalized intersection. So we had several discussions after we had our initial scoping meeting to where you see the alignment today. And so, again, internally from the team perspective, as we were looking to come in and out of the site, we all recognized that there's a portion of Cary Street that's one way. There was the initial Grace Street, and then there is where you see the current location. And the reason that we put it across from Church Manor Drive was several reasons. There was the access spacing, and then a big piece of it was as you turn on Main Street, that section has a center turn lane, and we wanted to make sure there was adequate storage to turn into this development, as well as to turn on Church Manor Drive, as well as to maintain a stacking distance onto Cary Street. So we had several calls after we had the scoping meeting to come up with our proposed access management strategy on Main Street. And after we got that access, all parties in agreement that this is what we're proposing, as well as our internal development team, we moved forward with the detailed analysis. And so then we submitted a traffic impact study, which is the trip generation, all the distributions, which were agreed to by all the review agencies before we even submitted the technical document, and we submitted that. We got initial comments from VDOT on behalf of the town. We addressed those, and we made a second submittal. At that time, we got additional comments, not only from VDOT, but the town had hired an independent traffic engineer to review our study. And when I say they reviewed it, when we have this traffic model, it has the storage lane lengths at each signalized intersection, the proposed storage lengths into the development. We had every input scrutinized relative to a 20-foot distance. Your model needs to be updated. You have 50 feet. It's only 20 feet. Run 10 simulations. Run the AM and the PM. And so we were scrutinized, I will tell you, by all parties, and then we resubmitted the traffic study, and the comment came back from VDOT that they were in agreement with the findings, that the proposed recommendations, the turn lanes, the access points would meet the development not only at full build-out, which is in 2030, but 6 years beyond that, which accounts for other growth in the area. So that was part of our scenario. Those are VDOT standards. The town and your consultant reviewed our study. So it went through a litany of reviews.
TIA, traffic impact analysis.
Correct.
One follow-up, if I could. And you may have answered it with the distance from signalization, but understanding that Route 10 is a limited access highway, Berry Hill Road comes into the limited access highway. It's still limited access to that point all the way down to where the bypass and Route 10 business intersect, correct?
It is. So following this traffic impact study, and if it proceeds to rezoning, the developer is still responsible to take this limited access break request, the right-in only, through VDOT, and it has to be approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. So this limited access, there is another step beyond this for VDOT to grant the access to allow the right-in off of 10.
But my question is, Berry Hill Road, are you familiar with where I'm talking about?
Is it to the south?
It's where you turn to the packing plants.
666.
Route 666 is west of that.
I
That is
apologize.
a T intersection that goes clearly to the right, clearly to the left. You can turn any way you want to. Why is Berry Hill Road, which has been there for a long time, it's basically your T intersection. Mr. Luder, can you answer why?
I can offer theory.
No, I don't really, honestly. I can imagine it's an industrial intersection. It was back there then, and population was down, but
It has to do with the trucks accessing the backing plants.
okay, if you don't know the answer, that's fine.
And that was
That's
well
okay.
beyond the study limits for this intersection, but it probably was, a limited access break at some time was provided, probably to provide direct access.
That's fine, okay.
Right.
It pre-existed the bypass. Berry Hill Road was there and before they did all the bypass work and made that all limited access, that was just Route 10, and there was access everywhere. And so Berry Hill Road had access from the very beginning. It was never limited access.
So it had access from old Route 10.
Yeah, that was all
From
right.
old Route 10, yes, but not from the bypass.
Right, but that's the whole point, Berry Hill Road is really not considered part of the bypass. The bypass was the new road from the intersection at Route 10 across the bridge.
Okay. You can continue. Ms. Roundtree?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's been some mention of like another, like a flyover, or would that be possible? I know we haven't even entered into that kind of discussion yet, but we have a bypass, like flyover thing that goes to my neighborhood at Cypress Creek, and that was paid for by our developer, I think, I understand. I don't think any public monies were used to fund that. Certainly is the way I get around everywhere. Can't imagine the neighborhood without it, but what's the possibility in the future of some kind of flyover or bypass to alleviate all the traffic that comes from the neighborhoods that are down past the YMCA?
So, per the VDOT average daily traffic count, so VDOT does a count on an annual basis on the road. Cary Street has an average daily traffic of 2,000 vehicles a day. That volume of traffic does not warrant a grade-separated interchange with Route 10.
I doubt that where the bypass was built to go to my neighborhood had 2,000, trips a day either. So does VDOT just take the position of, you got to prove it first, you got to be in trouble before we give you the solution?
It was done in 1987,
What was?
the Cypress Creek overpass.
Oh. So they're more strict now? Is that?
So, all the rules are different.
Is that possible, though? Some kind of,
I'm not sure I understand your question of where the overpass would affect relative to the Grange.
yeah, so on Cary Street, like as near our maintenance facilities and pump station and that. I mean, there's a lot of people that live down there. I don't know if you can show it on the map. I guess you can. So and we have a traffic problem now, right? According to those of us who live here. VDOT may not think 2,000 trips is a lot, but I do. And so that's our maintenance facility on the left? I'm just wondering if any time in the future, as like a release valve, if it's possible to put something else back there to let people out a different way. That's real simple, but that's my question.
There could be a request by the town for VDOT to evaluate a safety study or a demand, but based on the volume of traffic on Cary Street, it would not warrant interchange with direct access onto 10.
What do you have to get to warrant that?
I do not have the volume off the top of my head, but 2,000 vehicles. The capacity of a two-lane road is anywhere from 10,000 to 15,000 vehicles a day. And at 2,000 vehicles a day, you would have to have significant growth along that corridor to come up with. Now, I recognize that this is a rural area, but even if you doubled the volume, you are still within the capacity of a two-lane roadway.
Renee, I guess the difference too is where Cypress Creek is concerned, there was no capacity report required because the developer paid for that. So it wasn't anything that VDOT had to do other than, I guess, approving it. They weren't involved with that.
I mean, they still had to grant access, though, limited access. I heard back in the day that was a big deal to get the limited access even approved. And something about between like what the county owned and what the town owned, and that it was, I still understand it was a big deal.
Because I think that was a good question that Steve asked about Berry Hill and limited access. I understand what he's saying. Traffic goes both ways there.
Question.
Mr. Smith?
The traffic study you actually performed, was it just the traffic in this development, this concept plan, and then dumping out to wherever it goes? So all the studies you did, it's just inside the Grange, is that correct?
The study area, as defined in the pre-scoping meeting, was along 10 and along Main Street up to Cary Street. So we looked at the signalized intersection of 10 and Main, all the access points along Main up to Cary Street, the driveway that we're proposing north of Cary Street, and the access. And that was defined by the scoping meeting and all the stakeholders.
So let me understand this. The study from Main Street stopped at Grace, is that correct?
It stopped at Cary Street.
Stopped at Cary Street.
Yes, sir.
So part of that Grace that's now going to disappear was part of that study, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so we're going to send everybody down Grace into the development, correct? That's what I'm seeing.
Yes, sir. And
Okay.
the reason, when we looked at the roadway network, again, we were looking at a public roadway network that was creating a residential connection along Grace Street that would then extend in and realign so that it was at Grange and it would create a traditional four-legged intersection with Church Manor Trail, as opposed to making another access point. If you kept Grace and then you put Grange, you would not have adequate turns along Main Street to service a public road independent. So again, Grace Street, as it extends into the Grange, is a public road. And so we had to look at not only capacity on Main Street, one of the follow-up comments from the department was, look at the internal access of Grace and Grange, because that is a public road. So yes, that is the intent, to create a more appropriate spacing for not only Main Street, but Grace, its connection to Cary.
Okay, so that, it's a public road. I know we're not responsible for paving and so forth and so on Grace. Does it extend into the development as a public road, or is that a private road all of a sudden?
A public road.
Okay. So you'll have to go through the development to get out onto Main Street if you live over in that neighborhood, or either go the other way. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
But you can go out left on Main Street by the retention pond, right? Because I think that was part of the retraction in the papers, that there is an allowable left turn on Main Street the way it's designed. Is that right?
Yeah.
But you-
At
but you're
Main,
entering the development.
Yeah, it's up there by the pond, right? At the corner?
correct.
Where the columns are right now?
That road is going to be done away with. Am I wrong about that?
This intersection aligns with Church Manor Trail, and you would come in, instead of turning left here and coming around the corner, if you want to access Cary Street, you would come in Grange, and then you come up Grace, and then you turn, or
That's my question.
you,
Thank you. Yeah, you answered my question.
we've just shifted it. It's the same.
I mean, when I make it to the Y, it's not real safe the way it is right now, I don't think, with that, kind of corner right there by the auto place. So you're saying you like straighten it out and bring it up a little bit?
Correct. It was always, the reason that this is located here was to align with Church Manor Trail, such that as you're turning in on a public street, that you could have a dedicated left, and that you would not be opposing Church Manor Trail that also needs a dedicated left. And
So I
so,
can still, as I have the pond on my left, I can still go left to the post office on Main Street.
yes, this is you can come in and you can go to Cary. Our development traffic will come in and come down Karen Street. So we're internal to here, but Cary Street can come in and come out, and then come in and go left or right or
So
whatever.
how
So
would I drive to the YMCA?
you would come up Main, and you turn right here, and you come to the YMCA.
Could I do?
Or you could come Cary. There's no change in Cary Street. This is one way in. It's very narrow, so that's why.
Yeah, I don't ever use that. It's too
Correct.
narrow. That's
So-
dangerous. Could I also go through the development and make a right?
Sure.
Because it's going to connect to the YMCA, right?
It is a public street.
That's good. Does anybody else have any other questions while we have our traffic professional here? Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 2 on my list of questions was that I wanted to review the physical impact study again. And I know we got a letter on our town email about it. And I think I saw as people were flying through these slides that there's a couple slides on physical impact in here too. So did we get a copy of this slide deck? Does anybody know? Is that a hard question? Did we get a copy of this slide deck?
We have not been provided with that yet, but we can ask for it.
Okay, can we have a copy of the slide deck? The one that you're controlling right now?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
sent it to Tammy after every meeting. So you have it from last time? Yeah, this is the same one as last time. I just updated this one back today.
Okay, so I'm going to study that.
Yeah,
Can
we'll
you make
share
sure that we get a copy of this slide deck that we're looking at here? I think, again, what's your name again? Tim has been flying through this stuff, and I think I've seen like some elevations and some pictures of what stuff could look like too. I'm guessing that's all conjecture at this point because it hasn't made it past Julia, but Was that right? Are there pictures in here?
Yes, it's the same deck we went through last time.
I was kind of limited in what I saw last time because there was a lot of people here and we were already here till midnight, so.
Here's kind of the table of contents.
Show me the pictures.
My question would be, have they been proffered, those images?
I'm not guessing so,
No, because they can't be.
because Julia said she didn't want them
This is the
to.
only one, right?
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
they can't be proffered.
Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to know.
All right, so the market, fun activities. Okay, yeah, we did see this last time. Okay. Inspiration imagery, that's good. Okay.
Current elevations of the homes. Current elevation.
The apartments, let's stop there. Let's talk about height real quick. Can I don't know who can speak to height the best. Melissa, maybe? So I think someone made the comment that the hotel was going to be 4 stories, but that's not true, right? You're proposing it as 3?
Right. That very original application noted 4 stories, and we heard very loud and clear that 4 stories was not welcomed out on Main Street, and we changed that to 3 stories early on. The image that we show shows a picture, an image from Charleston, and it does show a 4-story image, but we show it because of the architecture and the content.
Oh, well, I see
Not
how that
because
may
it's
confuse people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's confusing, but thank you for clearing that up.
Can you show that too, so it's clear? The hotel. Right there. There it is. So it is confusing. We show a 4-story hotel. We've noted all along that we're showing a 4-story image, but we would be proposing a 3-story image.
In the fine print, that's good. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense, thank you. Do you have anything in this presentation that shows perspective? So if I'm driving to the YMCA and I see the nice houses on my left, do you have anything that shows, like, I know on social media there was something that showed, like,
Yeah.
I think it was like a black and white image, right? Have you seen that, of like what the houses that are there now look like, and then there's these big looming apartments right behind it has big question marks on
Yeah,
it.
we've found that, or it was somebody.
So do you have an actual picture of what the
Yes, we sent
perspective
it,
from the
and
street?
just so you're not seeing it for the first time here, I believe we emailed this to Tammy yesterday with responses to many questions. And Tip
Does
is,
somebody have that?
yes, we have it. We have what that image looked like and what the actual perspective would be.
It should actually be in your package.
A picture? I don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't see it in the packet, Michael.
Tip has it. He's just got to put the thumb drive into the computer to
Oh,
pull it up, because
oh.
it wasn't part of this older presentation. It's, like I said, it was submitted yesterday.
All right, so while we're looking for that, and I do want to come back to the height thing, but I've also heard comments from the public like, why do we flip the farmer's market, right? Farmer's market was supposed to be on the street,
Right.
looking good. Why did we move it back in the site?
I don't-
Did
are
we
you
ask for that?
Yes, you did.
Oh.
Do you have control of this presentation at the moment? Or is Tip trying to do? So could you go to one of the first images, and it shows historic concepts versus our plan? It's on an aerial. For me, it's just easier to look at, keep going. It's easier to look at the image so we can explain. Then go to the next image. It's an aerial. Oh, it's probably on, we pointed to it just so,
I feel like we saw it earlier tonight.
yeah, you did see it. There it is, go back. There it is. Oh,
I really like that one because I think those are the same people that
Go back,
designed the Calhoun area near Clemson where I went to college, and it's a very, very nice
Thank
development. Yeah.
you've passed it a couple times now. Amy, you've passed it a couple times.
Back up one slide.
Tip's got control again.
Oh, Tip.
This should be in this package, but it was in
The
your
two
email.
aerial images next to each other that show, it's historic concepts plan, and then, there, okay. Let me take this pointer. So, people were referring to this, and we had the farmer's market out here, and that's actually not true at all. The farmer's market was back here, and this was this is when they were proposing or talking about Smithfield Center moving to this site. That is no longer part of the proposal, as you all know. The farmer's market, like I said, was deep into the project beyond, on the other side of the green. We've actually taken the market and pulled it forward. And let me talk to that a little bit more. We don't have it right out on the street, because could you imagine these vendors trying to unload on Main Street? And how difficult that would be? So we pushed it a block back with great visibility to the building still. Remember, this side is a park, and it's wide open, so you'll be
And
able to
it's
see
low,
right over the.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
when I
and
look at
it's
the site,
much
that's
lower,
low.
that's exactly right. We do have a small 5,000 square foot building here, 1-story proposed, that will encumber your view for just a moment, but it's behind the Schoolhouse Museum, and really we're hopeful that that will help support the Schoolhouse Museum and be able to give some facilities to folks visiting the Schoolhouse Museum, whether that's an ice cream shop for kids to come and have ice cream right here after they get to enjoy the Schoolhouse Museum. So we have a road in front, we have roads all around, and that's very specifically to get the vendors off of Main Street and into the site, be able to unload, be able to have garbage trucks come in. We don't want that right on Main Street, and we don't have an access along the side of it to make that work. So that's why it's designed the way it is. We believe we have very good visibility to it, but again, note that the first plan had it back deep into the site, and you couldn't see it at all from Main Street. Does that answer that question? Now, Tip has, I think you were able to just plug in the graphics that you mentioned. We had this created as a better we'll talk about this first. So this was the image that was going around on social media, which is fairly inaccurate. So take a look at this White House. The actual Google image today is that White House. This house is this house. The trees, this is so hard to see here, but the tree line goes way back here, right? So we know the houses are, at very worst, the height of the tree line, we believe the tree line's taller than our building. Is there any way to zoom into this, Tip? Needless to say, there we go. There, you can see
So
the
you're
buildings.
saying even at a 4-story apartment,
Right.
the trees are taller? No, it's slightly taller than the trees.
No, we believe the trees will be taller. There's
You
the
do?
trees there. Here's the building. In this image, they're exactly the same height, so our building's exaggerated just slightly. And you can see the top of the 3-story, and because the 3-story has a pitched roof, and the top of the 4-story, which has a flat roof, are almost the same.
So the dark part
But-
is the trees to the right.
Yeah, and the trees, here are the trees right here. But
And this is what you think is the
this
perspective?
is what we know
You-
is the perspective, because we
Measured
know what the tree height is.
Right.
So, also remember that between the back of these houses and where those buildings are proposed, we have a required landscape buffer behind these homes. We have single-family homes. We have a village green and a recreation area. So there's a whole lot that's going to happen between these Cary Street houses and those apartment buildings that are way back there along the tree line. Tip, would you zoom back out? Sorry, Tip. It's a lot of demands of you at the moment. I apologize. So there's a pretty significant difference of what I would like to call propaganda and then what the actual image is.
Right.
And then if you go to the next slide, I think that's an image, an actual 3D image of what we've proposed.
And you propose the 4-story buildings closer to the trees and the 3 in front of it?
Right. And again, they're very similar in height. Because this has a pitched roof, the 3-story has a pitched roof, and the 4-story has a flat roof.
So remind me the height difference between the 3 with the pitch and the 4?
This, I don't have it directly in front of me, and I apologize. The top of the 3-story,
We're seeking 52 feet with the actual 4 stories are 50,
Are-
but we're requesting a 52-foot height variance for the 4 stories, and the 3 stories are 42 or 46.
the 42, because with the 3 stories, you measure to the midpoint of roof. But if you, the top of the roof, you don't, by definition for.
So you're asking for 52, but if it's 50, it's really only a 4-foot difference.
Right, that's right. And we're asking for the 52 because we have to measure from the ground up.
Right.
So depending on how grading works and undulations with the ground, we just don't want to design ourselves into a box.
So from the ground up, remind me the height of the Hampton Inn and Riverside, what Riverside got approved for? I mean, you said you're involved with that now, so.
Riverside asked for, I don't have it in front of me and I apologize.
Same as Smithfield Foods.
It was 47 feet.
67.
Yeah, I think so.
That's right, 67 feet in total.
It's the same
And
height as Smithfield Foods.
Riverside was just granted that just a few months ago, the
Right,
67
yeah.
feet.
I saw that.
Smithfield Food from ground to the top of roof is 67 feet, and the Hampton, I believe, is 4 stories in total. Wait, Tammy just mentioned it's
I
52.
believe it's 52 feet in height for
Hampton
the
Inn.
Hampton Inn.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Ms. Venable about height? I mean, I know that's been a contended issue, and it's the only part that the Planning Commission didn't approve out of the application and the variance proposed. All right, so Ms. Venable, a follow-up question to phasing, just because I still have you up here. It's not my next question, but there was some stuff in the paper and also in some citizen comments about, per Tammy Clary, Smithfield Planning Director, an email dated 8/10/23, the naming of the phases are not tied to the timing of construction. For example, Phase 3 could be started prior to Phase 1 for a project, which sounds a lot to me like turning 60 before you turn 50, but tell me, you know, like with Phase 1, what is the plan for Phase 1 that you're proposing, and why would you put those things in Phase 1?
So you know that Phase 1, we have to have the infrastructure in, right? So we have to come from Main Street to connect water. We have to come from where the pump station is, which is the street that accesses YMCA for sewer, and we believe we have to upgrade the line that takes you to the pump station. So, oh gosh, I'm sorry. Did you? So we know.
People at home are mad now. Okay.
So sorry.
Okay.
So we know that this road has to come in. We know that this road has to come in. So we have to have the infrastructure in that surrounds the market. Mr. Luter, from the beginning of this project, has said his intent and the way he's going to do this is the market is first. Everything we've written, everything we've talked about is the market is first. The infrastructure has to go in, which means sewer and water have to go in to make the market exist. We have to have sewer and water for that to happen, and we have to have drainage in place for that to happen. So this square has to be put in. We have some of this parking in yellow because we have to serve the market with parking, and we want it in close proximity. When we put this roadway in and this road network in, it allows us to bring some of these single-family homes online at the first phase, and we need to do that to offset the amount of costs that we're going to see for not only the off-site infrastructure, the water and sewer infrastructure that's both on and off-site, but like I said, this roadway and the infrastructure that's going to go here. So that is the only reason that we don't break it off, is because we have to offset some of these costs that I'm pointing to create the market.
Gotcha. So it is still the developer's intent and everybody's intent with the project.
Not only is it the intent, but we can't build, let's look at this here. We can't build this without, we've designated our phases, right? We can't build this phase back here without this road network being in place.
Gotcha.
And infrastructure that I just noted.
Makes sense. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions about phases? So Ms. Venable, while you're still here, my question number 4 had to do with public-private partnership, EDA, Judy Winslow, Farmers Market. We did all that. Number 5 had to do with more questions for the traffic engineer. I think she did a good job there. Number 6, is there enough parking spaces in the project? So, I mean, what's the waiver being asked for again with the parking spaces?
So the waiver specifically is being asked for the multifamily. We've talked about this quite a bit, not at your council hearing because we weren't able to get into those details, but your parking criteria requires 2.3 spaces per every multifamily unit. That, and I'm not that's very antiquated. What we're seeing for all PUDs across the board is anywhere from 1 to 1.7, usually about 1.5 is the average spaces per unit. We're asking for 2 spaces per unit in the multifamily section, just not the additional 0.3.
And these are how many bedroom apartments?
There'll be mostly 1 and 2, but there will be 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
So if you had a kid driving, that's where the .3 comes from, I'm guessing, because if you
Well,
had.
visitors typically, that,
Yeah.
you know, before 2020, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, the .3 was typically the visitor space, for every
Okay.
unit, or for every 3 units you'd have
Do you think this
one.
would be permitted parking around the apartments? So like,
So
I've got
we-
kids in college, right? And you get like 2 placards for a 2-bedroom place. And if I go to visit Blacksburg, for example, I can't park my car out front of her apartment because I don't have a pass. Like, will you permit the parking, or is that just
No,
free
it
for
won't
all?
be that, because we actually, the other exception we've asked for is that we have a shared parking agreement. So we may have designation for 1.5 spaces per unit, depending on what the unit is, but we have to keep spaces open and available for the farmer's market.
Gotcha.
So all of our parking, there'll be a shared designation that, you know, on certain days of the week that you'll be sharing with the market. So I believe there's 800 spaces in total on, you know, from on-street parking to this large area, this space here. We have 800 or over 800 spaces in total. We have it on one of the plans here. We don't need quite that many in total, but that's how many are designated in the project. And that obviously doesn't account for all the single family has a minimum of 2, but they all have garages and then 2 spaces in their driveway, so they actually have 4 spaces.
Gotcha.
But that 800 number doesn't account for those spaces.
So there won't be like bike lanes on these public roads in the development? We
No.
always have that problem with Cypress Creek with the bike lane, right? Can't park in the bike lane? So you can't park on street?
Yeah, you have very wide streets in Cypress Creek.
Uh-huh.
It's more, you know, suburban design. This is going to be more of a walkable, where you have sidewalks on each side.
Okay, so that was question 6. My question 7 had to do with staff clarifying the BHAR. I think we've covered that with Ms. Hilligas. Appreciate that. I got a response to that. Question 8 had to do with validity of offering overflow parking in the commuter lot, which Judy talked about a little bit. Number 9 had to do with the process for vetting construction and appropriate review for historically significant findings. I think we've beat that one too. Impact on water, sewer, fire, rescue, and police. So we've heard from water and sewer. Looks like there will be an additional proffer for $100,000 to help with a fire truck / rescue. I'm not sure. Haven't heard from the police yet. Chief Howell's been sitting here, real patient.
Yes, one of the things that thank you. One of the things that I would like to see is that any proffers for the police department will be done up front. The reason being because of the length of time it's taken us to hire, train, and retain officers. So if this build-out starts, we'd like to be ahead of the curve instead of trying to play catch-up.
And that would be handled through our town budget, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Right, that process. So you're not saying that the developer doesn't have to do anything with that. That's just us saying, okay, as these phases roll online, you want to make sure you have enough lead time to make sure we're appropriately staffed with officers according to the head count.
Yes, that's as it relates to this build-out, but also as it relates to other building projects in the town and also surrounding the town. Because anything that's being built in the town is going to draw traffic and also increase the traffic from any build-outs that is around, i.e. the Riverside Hospital. It's going to cause more traffic to come to the hub, which is Smithfield.
Oh, so it's interesting. I didn't consider that because that's outside of the town limits, right? So it's an interesting perspective.
Yes.
Even people like, I've got a brother-in-law that lives in Chuckatuck, but they shop in Smithfield, right? They go to Kroger for shopping. So I do imagine that would affect us. But when I asked this question on Monday night, if you recall, I think Michael answered it, maybe you answered it, about any proposed development in the town, if anything was going to come online, right, for the current budget, 23-24, ending June 30, right, 24. And if we had appropriately budgeted for extra officers for anything to come online, you guys said no.
Yeah, we have not added any.
Because nothing will come online extra? I mean, how about all the stuff he's talking about that's outside of the town?
Yeah,
Did we miss that boat?
as our population increases, we will keep track of that. We typically, every 300 in population, you want an officer, 300 to 500. And so we'll keep track of that, and as we need to add officers, we'll propose those in the budget.
I think what you hear Chief Howell saying is that even if it's not in the town limits, it's still affecting our force,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments about impact to your department, Chief Howell, of this proposed project?
No, not as it relates to this project.
I got a question in reference to that question that you just asked about hiring new police officers. I understand increase in police officers based on households for the subdivisions, but how do you determine how many police officers to increase the police department by what you speculate as other people coming into the town? How do you, what's your recommendation on how many officers to increase?
I recently went to Southwest Virginia, Whitfield, the town of Whitfield. Their population is approximately the same as it is in Smithfield. Their department is approximately 30 to 32 officers. I asked the question, how did you all have a department so large? Because our authorized strength is 23. With the projected growth, there's, by a calculation that with all the proposed building, there was going to be approximately 2,000 homes built in and around. Now, I'm not talking overnight, but over a period of time. By that calculation, the town police department should increase by 7 or 8 officers. So we should be in the 30 to 31 area of officers. Having said that, you would think 10 square miles is a lot of officers, but when you actually look at it, that's in a perfect environment. No one is on vacation, no one is in training, and so those numbers will dwindle.
I understand what you said, but you said their population growth.
Yes.
In your conversation with Renee, hypothetically, her brother-in-law lives in Chuckatuck. He comes to Smithfield to shop at Kroger. You said that Riverside Hospital is going to generate more traffic as well. My question is, how do you anticipate how many police officers to increase the police department by anticipated traffic from Riverside? That's not growth in developments here. So how do you anticipate that variable?
Well, when we looked at those numbers, and John Settle and I, when John Settle was employed here, he and I looked at the potential growth that was projected in and around the town. It was estimated the average home would be 2.5 people. Using that calculation, and I think the number was approximately 300 residents per officer. It was projected that there was a possibility that the growth of Smithfield would increase, would actually double over a series of years, probably in 10 years. So you're looking at over 10,000, over 15,000 people. If, in a perfect environment, if that were to happen, with those projections, it is recommended that, yes, we get ahead of the growth and increase staffing so that as the growth takes place, we're already ahead of the power curve.
I must not be asking the question right.
Not many localities account for the outside population. That 1 per 300 number kind of assumes that there's going to be some transient population in your locality.
Okay, so that's built into the
Right.
equation.
Nobody that I'm aware of actually does that.
You
Now,
can't anticipate that.
if you
Yeah.
are the only.
It's like a college town. That's probably a pretty
If you're
good
the
example.
only
Yeah.
town in a huge county, you may look at what's around you because you know everybody's coming there, but as spread out as we are, we would just account for that in that number that we were already looking at.
Is Smithfield a city, or is it within a county?
It's a town within a county, I believe.
It's a town within a county,
Yes.
okay. But I think we have time to budget additional police officers in our budget, because we don't really need that right today.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
We could stand to increase, in my opinion. In my professional opinion, we could stand to increase our police department right today.
We'll talk about that.
Yes, ma'am.
My last question had to do, can you believe it? Like, it might be my last question. I do reserve the right to,
I'm not going to comment on that, no.
I do reserve the
But I would
right
bet it's probably not, but go ahead.
to ask about like timeline and what's next, right? What's next steps? I would like to ask that after I ask this question about reclamation. So there's a lot of comments about small town charm and honoring the history and the Pierceville, project. The Pierceville property and the house, and that it was torn down. And I think, especially our historical society, and that has a lot of angst over that, right? And I think I had heard, let me step back. So I know I remember that in a meeting a long time ago, there was something about sidewalks. And this has been brought up in some of the town comments too, that we were gonna, sidewalks were already planned. So you talk about incorporating the columns that are kind of cool and very historic, right, on the corner. And then I feel like they're talking about sidewalks from the proposed development to the corner for the historic overlay and all that stuff. And I feel like in a meeting, since I've been on council, so it can't be before 2000, or 2020, 2000, that we had said, we had made a commitment, we're gonna make sure that these sidewalks are in keeping with brick or something and not regular old cement. Is that right? Do I remember that correctly?
Tip, we have a graphic for that too, which you weren't able to see.
We already committed, if
Yes.
this development or not, have we committed to making it look good to the corner?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Also, I was going to ask Mr. Luter you mentioned a couple other things that I think he needs to
About
address in regard to
reclamation?
reclamation.
Yeah, I do want to hear that, but you can talk about the sidewalk first if you
You
want.
can say, so just like the brick paver walk that's pictured here on the left of the three pictures, the top left, that is kind of symboled with red, and that would run along the front face on Main Street and then up Green Street, which is noted on the plan. That's, if you zoom out, Tip, it's noted on the plan where those brick pavers would go. So around the Farmers Market or Smithfield Market, up Green Street, the crosswalks there, and Main Street. And then we would have more of a concrete walkway, which is in green, at the back side of the retail building, and then the walkways that would go around the pond and around the apartment area and in the sidewalks that are part of the right-of-way, and then crushed gravel for the trail system. So this has been, again, part of our package throughout. Let me hand this over to Mr. Luter.
But we made a commitment too to do
Yeah,
the
that's
brick.
my
So
specific
where
question.
is our commitment fitting on this?
We committed $225,000 to ensure that from the point where they start to the intersection, we would commit that to ensuring they're brick sidewalks.
So are we connecting to the brick sidewalk is that the 300 block?
The project that's on the books now that Isle of Wight County is doing takes them from where they end currently.
Which is where?
They end in that 300 block.
Where their public parking lot
Right.
is.
From there,
Oh,
and it will go all the way to Westside Elementary, connect
Oh.
to those. And so we have agreed to contribute that $225,000 to that project to cover the delta between what they had already budgeted for and making them brick.
all the way from the small public lot, past the old gas station, past this proposed development all the way to West Side?
Our contribution was specifically geared towards Grace to Maine. But we would work with them to, it's in our best interest to make it all be brick.
And to somebody's point earlier, $225,000 to do the job whenever we said we would do it, probably won't cover it.
Right, it was specifically to cover that delta since the county had already committed funding to make them concrete sidewalks.
So where in this picture are the old columns that we want to make sure we incorporate?
Where the BMP pond is.
By the pond? Proposed? Right there. All right, so Mr. Luter, what, small town charm and honoring the history in that, what kind of special things have you done with this?
One of the things that, when we first acquired this property, I got with Mike Smith and asked him to disassemble 3 of the red barns that were on the property with the intention of preserving as many good quality beams as we possibly could. And the vision at that time was to take those beams and repurpose them within the farmer's market. Whether they go inside the farmer's market or whether they're part of the exterior part of the farmer's market stalls, that's to be determined. We have to assess how many we've got, but the intention with those was to specifically memorialize the property with those old beams and bring note to the history of the property. So that was done within the first 60 days that we acquired the property.
Was there much salvageable in the house?
Mike, I don't remember how much is, in the house, we didn't try to save anything in the house.
Everything in the house, just the barns.
Just the barns, but some great old beams there. And Mike, I don't recall how much which we've got. I think you're storing it, but
Yeah, it's more than I wanted to store it.
well, if we need to move it, we certainly can. But the intention at that time was to preserve it and repurpose it in this project.
Okay, well, that's honorable, that you're trying to preserve those beams and that you have the intent to reuse it. I tell you, one thing that's been big on my mind as we've gone through this process is the fact, thank you, Mr. Luter, that Mr. Pack hasn't, been a part of any of these discussions. He's recused himself because he thinks in the future he may have involvement, with the restaurant and with the site. And I tell you, I'm just hearing that Mike had involvement with reclaiming the wood and that from the barns and the site.
That was before this ever came up as a development. He just asked me to do that. I tore them down, I stored the wood, and that was it.
Okay.
So I wasn't involved in any of this planning of this at all, none whatsoever. I didn't know what he was gonna do with a piece of property. I had no idea. There were people robbing from the house and the barns.
Okay, I think we can take him at his word, what he said.
Okay, I didn't know that part.
Well, now we do.
Okay. So my next question is, timeline, like what do we do next, right? We had the work session, I think people had questions that were unanswered, and then I certainly submitted the most of them, but I'm just kind of wondering, I know we have a meeting next week, but what do you intend, Mayor Bowman?
Well, unless, we had decided we were going to have a work session. After the work session, we were going to vote on the matter. And I don't know what else in the process, that would preclude us from doing that. That's what the intent of this work session was, for every question by every member of council who wished to participate could ask.
And just to be clear, we were asked to submit questions with a deadline, correct?
That's correct.
And the deadline was what?
It was
The
2 weeks
14th?
ago.
The 14th.
So that they had time to adequately prepare answers?
Yes, ma'am.
And then on Monday
They've
at
been
committee.
preparing answers by the hour,
Right.
just to their credit.
Yeah, which I appreciate. Actually, since Monday, and Valerie did a great job in your stead, running the meeting Monday, by the way, but.
No doubt in my mind she will.
But, we've gotten some good additional questions since Monday, and I appreciate that staff has been able to answer those so quickly, because it's been a lot.
Yeah.
And I hope that gives people, comfort.
But that was my plan, unless y'all feel otherwise. I don't.
So to my point about questions, Mr. Brooks missed tonight, right? And we talked on Monday, and he said he was still formulating questions, but then when I asked you earlier, he didn't submit any of those questions.
I have not received any. No.
So
Okay.
I guess he had his chance. He didn't have any? He didn't ask any? Okay. I just don't want to
haven't
go,
spoken with him about
go
it
to
yet.
Tuesday and he's on
I haven't spoken to
FaceTime.
him, he hasn't spoken to me about the
Right.
questions, so, yeah.
I don't want to go to Tuesday and he's on FaceTime and we like try to vote on this thing and then he's gone and said, he hadn't asked his questions.
No, I think unless I hear from you this evening, we'll put it on old business for action.
Okay.
But I'm not, I have some questions. I've waited till the end, so I've
Oh.
got, and it won't be many. Mr. Luder.
Perfect.
Much has been made about your father's legacy and what he has done for the town of Smithfield and how you had intended to make sure that this would be up to the same par that your father has done things. I want to tell you just right up front, and I don't mean to be flippant about it, although I've only been elected once and it's been brought to my attention that I've been appointed 3 times by 3 governors, and that didn't really amount to anything, and that's fine. It's not a problem. I can understand that. But I want you to know and the people to know that your name means nothing as far as my deliberations are concerned in my ultimate decision. I've heard cases from far and wide in my previous positions from the regular citizen to someone that thought that they were in a high position. So I want to let you and the citizens know that my decision has nothing to do. It has to do with the merits of the case. And if I sound overly judicial, there may be a reason for that. It may be the many, many hours I spent in court seeing the plight of the common man and those that are in different positions, different stations. So I just want to make that clear as clear can be. My concern is this, and based on what you have said, you want to make sure that this project is one that the town will be proud of, that we will be proud of as the elected representatives, realizing that you do live out of town. Explain to me how you're going to ensure, if this project is approved, the best possible project that we as decision makers can expect in our deliberations as far as the rezoning application is concerned. Explain to me how you're going to make sure, if it is rezoned and if it moves forward, what you're going to do to ensure that it comes out the way that you have conveyed that it is going to turn out.
Well, number one, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be hands-on with this project. Just because I live out of town doesn't mean that if this is approved, I'm not overseeing this project. Again, will I be here every day? No, but I will be here on a regular basis overseeing this project. Number two, I'm doing this because my father asked me to take the lead on this project. This is his final project. This is likely his last contribution to the town, and I can assure you, the love and the respect I have for my father, I'm going to make darn sure that the quality of this project is on par with all the other projects that my father has done.
Because if you get right down to it, when we make decisions based on anything that Ms. Venables put up, anything the traffic person's put up, a lot of other things that go into the metric of making that decision. But trust is a significant part, and trust to these people that are willing to tolerate a significant lifestyle change in what they're going to be dealing with. We have to have a significant trust in believing in what you're going to do is the right thing to do.
One of our first calls to action, if we do get approval on the rezoning, is we're going to sit down in the first 30 days with Julia and her team at BR to ensure that we are all on the same page and that what we are proposing does, in fact, meet the standards. I mean, I'm confident they will, but you know, she does control the quality, the look and the quality, and I can assure you that, I mean, you look at the apartments as an example, and even the houses. I mean, we're going to build something that is in keeping with downtown, and that's going to come at a higher cost. But we're doing that because it's the right thing to do, and we want it to complement downtown. It will complement downtown. But, if she doesn't like what we're proposing, then it's not going to get built. It's not going to get approved. And we're going to have to go back and, and revamp. But we have been transparent. We've shown some visual images of what we're proposing, what we think the look is in keeping. And I think it's important that we sit down very early and reconfirm that everybody is on the same page.
Thank you. Further questions?
I'd like to
Yes,
say
Ms.
something. I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Unlike what Mayor Bowman has said about trusting the developer, I'm hoping that you have come to us in good faith, and based on your dad's past experiences with us, we do have an idea of the quality that he's already built for us. But I'm putting my trust in Bihar and the Planning Commission, because whatever you present to us, I'm looking for Julia and Charles Bryan and the rest of the makeup of those two committees to say, this is the quality of product that we want. So I'm hoping that you and the developers have come to us in good faith and say, we're going to build a quality product for you. But ultimately, I'm looking in the hands of Julia and others to make sure that we hold you to what you've committed to us for.
And we welcome the collaboration.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
No, sir.
There being none, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your participation.
Wait, I could have thought you up one more